establish a quorum.
Kevin Albanese.
Here.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
Linda Clifford. Linda? Is she there?
Turn your mic on. Here.
David De La Torre.
Here.
David Diaz.
Here.
Susan Granzella.
Here.
Joan Hancock.
Here.
Pastor Herrera.
Here.
Ed Lang.
Here.
Mike Layton.
Here.
Marlo Richardson. Marlo?
Not here yet.
Okay. Frank Shutter.
Here.
Johnny Simpson.
Here.
Nancy Springer.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gina. As I mentioned a few moments ago, we are conducting a split meeting of the board with staff and board members in Sacramento, staff and board members here in Las Vegas. We are also happy to be joined by our colleagues from the Nevada State License Board for our annual joint meeting. Executive Director of Northern California, Mr. Bob Alvarado, who is
Joe Hanson, member of the Nevada State Contractors Board.
And Jan Leggett, current chairman, only for this morning. Margaret Cabin had to go back to Reno last night. Thank you very much. And I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our CEO, Margie Green. Thank you very much, appreciate it. And in the back, we have Nancy Mathias, the head of our licensing division. And we have Jennifer, and I'm all of a sudden, Bill, I'm sorry. Jennifer, I'm sorry.
Lewis.
Lewis. And it wasn't even a tough evening. I was in bed at 8:30. And no one else in our legal counsel. Thank you very much. We've already done the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Augie Beltran for his facilitating this meeting here at this facility as well. It's an excellent, beautiful facility. Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Margie Green. Oh, I'm sorry, what? One more time. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Public comment in Las Vegas? Hearing none, I will now turn it over to Margie Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, California, for having us again. It's great to have you in our state after 9 years of being in California. We welcome you here, and again, thank you for the excellent facility. We're going to go back and forth on the agenda a little bit, the first item we have is our joint discussion just about our operation and structural comparison. We've provided some information sheets of just the differences and similarities between our two states for you. And Dave, did you want to comment on that?
Well, I would just comment that on page 369 of California board packet, we do a comparison for these categories. I just wanted to like to point out just a couple things I found to be kind of interesting, maybe get some input from the board on applications received. We compared California calendar year 2016 to 20. So while there's the construction industry is doing quite well, our applications are down. And I'm not sure if that's happening in Nevada. I thought that would be interesting to learn more about. Also, we do a comparison of restitution. One area that Nevada is different than California is in Nevada, you have a recovery fund. And in California, we don't have the recovery fund, but what we do have is a very aggressive dispute resolution program that provides for binding arbitration and also a judgment suspension program where we suspend a license until the outstanding liability is paid. And you'll see on the comparison in the packet that for last year, we were able to recover $44 million from consumers. But it is something that our board has wanted to look at is whether a recovery fund would be beneficial and perhaps manageable for the number of licensees that we have in California. You also have a slightly different classification structure. I believe you have more than one general building classification, something our board's been taking a look at, whether additional general building classifications are needed. As an example, for developers that don't self-perform the work, they hire licensees. For remodeling contractors, to what extent can a remodeling contractor obtain a license? I would just point out that I've had a long time, very strong working relationship with Margie and her staff, and it's been wonderful to be able to share information throughout the year, but also to attend these annual meetings. Mark?
Thank you, Dave. Yes, and with that, I'd like to add, on our exam waivers with other states in 2017, the Nevada legislature passed a bill that required all professional and occupational licensing boards to implement programs which provide for licensure by endorsement to applications licensed in another state. We've expanded that. And Nancy, would you like to come up and talk about that program a bit?
And as she's coming up, I'd like to invite Sacramento. We will do our very best, but I know you're not shy. Don't be shy to jump in as necessary as you see it.
know, for many years, the states of Arizona, California, Nevada, and Utah have had exam waiver agreements in place. And those agreements have allowed us to waive exams for applicants who have passed a similar exam and are now seeking licensure in one of our states. As we mentioned, we have new legislation in Nevada that requires all occupational license boards.
We can't hear you very well in Sacramento.
Well, closer to the mic if that's helpful. So we're required to adopt programs of licensure by endorsement. And this legislation requires that we look at all of the licensure programs throughout the United States and identify where there might be similarities that would allow us to waive certain requirements. The legislation also requires that we adopt regulations to implement that program and also to enhance portability of licensure. In our effort to implement that program, we decided to look at two areas. One is the experience qualification requirement, and then secondly, the trade exam requirements for licensure. It sounded simple enough when we started this project, but it really turned out to be quite a daunting task because as we started looking at programs, we found that there are some, thank you, Rick. We found that the programs throughout the United States really vary significantly. And so ultimately what we decided to do is identify where a state has either one or more classifications that is substantially similar to ours. And where we identified those, we determined that we would be able to waive the experience certification requirement for those applicants. And separately, we looked at the exam programs in those states for those classifications and looked for opportunities for waiving the trade exam. In most of the areas, we were able to waive trade exams for states that use PSI as their exam provider, because that is who we use in Nevada. And then we identified where those exams were substantially similar. We included a couple other states, including your state, California, based on our long-standing exam waiver agreements. And so in order to qualify for licensure by endorsement, the applicant must be actively licensed in one of those states we've identified, have held that license for 4 years, and not have had any discipline, suspension, or sanction against the license. Nevada also recognizes the NASCO accredited general building exam. So if an applicant has passed that exam and provides proof of that, we'll waive our general building exam for that applicant as well. Through these efforts, we've been able to expand our licensure by endorsement to 14 other states. And while this is a newly implemented program, it's really our hope that this will help to reduce some of the barriers to licensure and also streamline our application process. Happy to answer any questions concerning that.
I have one question. So are these 14 other states, is that across the whole spectrum of licensing, or is it individual classifications?
Individual classifications. And I believe we provided you with a charter list of those we identified. So in some states, it may only include 2 or 3 classifications. In other states, such as Arizona and Utah, that are more closely aligned with Nevada, the list is more extensive.
In this case, you're basically working on a reciprocity kind of format, right? Where they are bringing something from outside of Nevada.
What we're looking at is we still require an application and require the applicant to meet our background and financial responsibility requirements. We looked at areas where we could waive certain requirements of licensure, and the 2 that made the most sense were the experience certification requirement and the exam, trade exam requirement.
Okay, so with regards to the experience, are you allowing overlapping experience? In other words, are you allowing experience to be counted for similar types of classifications, or if they count it here, can they also count it there? Or are you requiring, if you use this time for that classification, you can't use any of it for this classification?
In our own program, we certainly allow overlapping experience. Experience is difficult sometimes to validate. Sometimes the documentation that's provided, maybe the correct words aren't used, or we don't always see what we think we should see. And so we're really looking to determine whether they have an equivalent level of experience that would qualify them for licensure. Nevada also has a classification structure in which we have primary classifications and sub-classifications. So oftentimes if somebody applies for a license, for example, a plumbing license, and maybe only has experience in installing water heaters or residential plumbing, we're able to direct them into that subcategory in lieu of denying the requested classification.
I just have one more question. You allow, so you do allow overlapping experience, okay? And do you allow either education or training to take the place of experience in either certain classification, some classifications or any classification?
Of training or education in lieu of other types of experience.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other comments from Las Vegas board members or Sacramento? I think that's exciting. I know that that's something that continually comes up on our sunset review. Our legislature is on us to reduce the barriers for licensure, license everybody with the minimal qualifications that meet the minimal qualifications and get them in the system. So we certainly look forward to working with you on that. I understand, Laura Zuniga in Sacramento, do you have comment on what we're doing to reduce the barriers on licensure?
I think Marlo is going to address that a little bit later on the agenda. Marlo Richardson.
Do you want to address it now? Let's go ahead and take it now because Marlo's not here.
Okay. So as the board members probably recall, over the last couple board meetings, we have been looking at our reciprocity program. The states, we currently have reciprocity, limited reciprocity with 3 states, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah, for certain classifications. At the last board meeting, the board voted to pursue additional reciprocity agreements with Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Oregon to waive the B General Building Trade Exam for a qualified applicant that has passed the National Association of State Contractor Licensing Agencies Commercial General Building Exam, if the state agrees to accept CSLB's B General Building Trade Exam. These applicants would still be required to complete the law and business exam, and this would be the first time CSLB would accept the NASCLA Commercial General Building Trade Exam. So we're currently in the process of contacting those states to determine if they would accept our applicants as, so we could enter into formal agreements with those states. So that'll come back to the board at the next meeting.
Wonderful. Any questions, comments from anybody here in Las Vegas? Sacramento? Seeing, hearing none. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. I apologize. We did have that information about the exams in 2 different sections on the agenda. So I don't know if that will cover the second item with discussion of the brief note, and so I probably jumped ahead a bit.
This meeting is being recorded.
It was started in 1999, and we started paying out claims in approximately 2001. The assessment for the fund is paid by licensed contractors, and that's based upon their monetary limit. Assessments range anywhere from $80 up to $400. The recovery fund provides certain limited compensation to injured homeowners, of single-family homeowners that have been damaged by a licensed contractor's failure to properly execute a contract and have exhausted all other means of recovery. So over the course of time, we've made a few legislative adjustments to the recovery fund. This year will be no exception. The single-family recovery fund claim cannot exceed $35,000 per claimant, and a contract or a claimant against any single contractor cannot exceed $400,000. We are changing that legislation, hopefully, this coming session, based upon some severe claims against the fund. Also, the first claim, as I mentioned, was paid in 2001. To date, we paid 1,678 claims, totaling $11,114,000. And our current fund balance of the recovery fund is $6,251,000. So during fiscal year 2015-16, we had a total of 67 claims. Claims awarded of those were 56. Total awarded amount was $797,000. The average award was approximately $14,200. Then we had a couple of large, usually it's one large contractor that goes out and there's multiple claims. As we talked about last year, we had Summerlin Energy claims paid on that. And basically the consumers got approximately 20 cents per dollar, is that right?
I think it came out to like 38 cents on the dollar.
And so while that was help for them, it wasn't enough, and that's part of the reason we're going back to the legislature to increase that. It took a couple of years for us to get our roots grounded on as far as what to do with the recovery fund, but it really is an excellent program, because a lot of times you revoke a contractor's license, the board will revoke a license. There's no relief for the homeowners other than to go to court. This has been a simple method for them to recover their damages. So we are big proponents of it. I know that would be an entirely different program in California with a difference in population, but we are very proud of what the recovery fund has done for the homeowners of the state. So are there any other questions about the recovery fund?
Ms. Green, this is Pastor. Hi. We lost connection when you were talking about what is the basis for leveling the fee on your licensee. Could you just kind of go over that? Because we lost the connection at that point.
Certainly. Well, in Nevada, our licensing structure is a little bit different. We have license limits. So that assessment charged to each contractor is based upon the monetary limit of his license. It ranges anywhere from $80 up to $400, depending on how large the contractor is. The only licensees that pay into the fund are residential contractors. So that's a little bit of a difference. If it's someone doing strictly commercial, they do not pay into the recovery fund. And we somewhat rely on them to tell us whether they're doing residential or not, and then we assess the fund. The industry itself has been very supportive of this fund, because they, like the rest of us, want to put the bad contractors out of business, and we also want to take care of our public. And so it's been a great program. We did have a few hiccups initially with it, getting it off the ground, but the contractors have not objected in the least bit having to pay into the fund. They're very supportive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the board, members of the public in Las Vegas or Sacramento? I have a quick question. I know at the time you require a bond based upon the monetary limit of the licensee. Is that an area of recovery for the homeowners?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it is, but however, they are usually the last in line to recover on the bond. It's usually material suppliers, subcontractors, et cetera. So the homeowner usually ends up with nothing on a bond claim. And our bonds range anywhere from $1,000 up to $500,000.
Outstanding, thank you. Any other questions?
Are we talking just on this whole thing or just the recitation? Question.
So long as it's on the agenda, we can talk about whatever you want, except for your license. That's.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have a question. So I look at your guys, the size of your staff and how many active licenses you have and the size of our staff and how many licenses we have. And it's basically, I did the math real quick, and you have pretty much twice the staff per license as we do. Are you guys okay on staff? Are you still shorthanded, or are you short? What do you feel?
I believe we're right where we should be with our staff. We do a more extensive licensing process, I believe, than California does. Also, we have our recovery fund takes extra hours. We're continually trying to streamline that process, but because we require financial statements and the license limits, and we have more hours spent in licensing than I believe California does.
Yes, and you also basically revoke 3 times the licenses per license in California as well. So just kind of wondering if we're too little or I just don't know.
Maybe Mr. Allison can speak to our revocation process.
One of the large differences I've noticed between the California and Nevada schema is that our financial, our license limits, we review a lot of financial records. We have to do quite a bit of determination as to financial responsibility, and that does take a lot of staff time to do that. I can tell you that as being the attorney for the board and also as seeing it from the contractors on the outside and working with the people there.
Thank you.
And Mr. Diaz, to answer your question about the revocations, we do not outsource that. We have a team of attorneys we use for administrative law judges, and we try to get the cases in and out as quick as possible so that when the bad actor needs to be out of business, we give them due process, but we take quick action.
Thank you.
Ms. Springer?
I just want to say that the recovery fund sounds like an absolutely wonderful kind of program that you're doing there, and just commend you all on doing that. That was great.
Thank you.
And Kayla, for the record, Marlo Richardson is present, so if you can note that in the minutes, please.
Mr. Chair, this is Pastor. I had a question, general question. Ms. Green? Okay. Thank you very much for providing this comparison sheet. It's really kind of helpful, and you did a good job with it. One of the areas, since we're in the general overview and discussion of the different programs here, a real hot button issue for us, Ms. Green, is workers' comp insurance. And I just wanted to know if you do have a provision that you can exempt licensees from obtaining workers' comp. And if you do, what is that percentage? And what is just your experience with requiring, I guess, this provision, workers' comp insurance to your licensee?
Thank you. I'll ask Ms. Matthias. She may have the statistics on that more than I do. I'll ask her to answer that for you. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have requirements that applicants and licensees provide proof of workers' comp insurance, which covers their employees. So for the small number of applicants or licensees that do not have employees, they can sign an affidavit of waiver from workers' comp coverage in order to obtain or renew their contractor's license. And I'm sorry, Pastor, I do not have the percentage with me today, but I can certainly get that to you.
Is it anywhere close to 55%?
I'm quite certain it is not.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman? Yes. Yes, I am actually in the insurance industry, so I might be able to help just a little bit, but when you register your business with the Nevada Secretary of State, one of the questions that it asks you, depending on the way that you're structured, is whether or not you have employees, and you are required to mark yes or no. And if you mark the yes box on that, then you are absolutely required to have the workers' compensation insurance. And the other thing that the state does is it tracks. So once you get your workers' compensation insurance, a notice is sent to the Department of Businesses and Industry. So they are very well aware that you have that coverage. If for whatever reason you fail to pay the premiums and your insurance policy is canceled, they will automatically either come out and talk to you personally, but you will have an automatic fine for any lapse. I think the minimum fine is $500. Our state is a little bit different than most other states. I know that I came from California. Workers' compensation is rated on payroll. Nevada has a cap, $36,000. So if you have people making over $36,000, they're only going to be charged $36,000 on the workers' comp. So that's a great advantage to our state as far as people that come to our state to do work. So if you're California licensed and you're Nevada licensed, we're going to be a little bit more lenient with you on the workers' comp and the workers' comp insurance. The other thing I noticed here, which I wasn't aware of being on board, is that it looks like there's no requirement for people to have the general liability insurance. This is one area that I probably should speak about this later, but I really think it's really important that the contractor have the general liability insurance, because there's been situations where there's been property damage or failure to complete work, or work that's completed that there's an issue with it. And if you have a general liability policy and the contractor names you as an additional insured on their insurance policy, there is a way in some cases to have some recovery for damages that you could have incurred as a result of that contractor's work. So this is something that you may want to consider looking at.
Chair Leggett, I think you had something to add?
Thank you, Kevin. Back to Ms. Springer's comment regarding the recovery fund. Sitting on the recovery fund committee, it's very gratifying to have the homeowners come before us and explain their predicament and see the awards that we're able to give them. It's contingent upon working with a licensed contractor, and it's an inducement to work with a licensed contractor. Most people don't realize that, but it is very effective once they do. Thank you very much.
I also had a question for you. When you register with the Nevada Secretary of State, your business, what about sole proprietorships? How are you making sure sole proprietorships, if they have employees, have workers' compensation?
It's the same thing. Usually when you register, they're going to, once you mark that box, because there's a box that says right in there, and it's kind of a warranty thing. So if you misrepresent, you're going to get yourself in trouble. We have some little bit of different laws in the workers' compensation in the state of Nevada. Another thing is, if you're an independent contractor and you're doing work, if you don't have any insurance, so you could hire somebody that doesn't have any insurance on the workers' compensation, and you could be held responsible for their workers' comp injuries. So some people are aware of that, some people aren't aware of that.
And what I'm trying to understand, does a sole proprietor, in order to conduct business in Nevada, does that individual also need to register with the Secretary of State?
You know, I can't answer that for you. I know most people do that are legitimate businesses.
Legitimate.
I can respond to that. In Nevada, we have a state business license requirement, which is run through the Secretary of State. So if you're operating any kind of business, whether you're a sole proprietor or not, the Secretary of State knows you're operating.
Absolutely. Thank you. Counsel?
Going back to the general liability insurance issue, I did want to note that for limited liability companies in California, you do have to have general liability insurance and at least $1 million if you have 5 or fewer employees. And then it goes up every 100,000 for each additional personnel record up to 5 million. So there is a general liability insurance requirement in California, but it's only for the limited liability companies.
Thank you.
Question? Question in Sacramento? Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, you're on.
Joe, can you further explain that $36,000 cap? We kind of lost you when you were going into that discussion. Part of the audio
Yes,
here is...
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? We used to be in
meeting is being recorded.
There we go. Okay, can you hear us? Can you hear us, Joe? Just wave if you hear us.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Could you start over?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Nevada used to be what's called a monopolistic state, which meant it had a state fund, and then that changed 2002, I think it was. And when that changed, then it opened up the marketplace for workers' compensation in the state of Nevada. Now, I don't know, I'm not familiar with the reason why they set up the cap, but Nevada is one of the few states that I know of, or maybe the only state that I know of, maybe because of the population, that workers' compensation premium payrolls are capped at $36,000. So up to $36,000, you will be charged whatever the rate is for the classification. Anything over that amount of money, you will not be charged. Typically, the insurance company will ask you for the actual payroll and the cap payroll, just to get a kind of a sense of how you're doing as far as businesses.
What, $36,000 per what?
Employee per year.
Okay, thank you.
That's fantastic. I mean, there's no reason why you should be cheating workers' comp in Nevada. Any other comments from Sacramento, the public in Sacramento, public in Las Vegas, the board? Seeing and hearing none, moving on. We're going back to Margie Green.
Thank you. Today, I'm going to give you a brief presentation on the Occupational Licensing Consortium. You still have seconds?
Stand by for just a second. Yes, we're sending them your PowerPoint, so it'll be just a second. It's going to be also, it's on the screen above you too. Or it's actually probably better if you look at the screen. This one's going to be small, but okay, we're ready for you.
Okay, thank you. So with the discussion on Occupational Licensing Consortium, what's behind this is reform. The focus on the regulatory bodies, it stems from our North Carolina Dental Board case with the U.S. Supreme Court and occupational licensing reforms. In July of 2015, the White House under President Obama put out a set of best practices for state policymakers to reform licensing and to reduce the prevalence of unnecessary and overly broad occupational licenses they believe to hurt workers and consumers. Today, the Trump administration is taking additional steps towards occupational licensing reform with deregulation of certain occupational licensing. This is now a bipartisan effort. They also have mentioned a workforce shortage, particularly in construction, having created this call to action. Certain populations they deem to be affected by this include military spouses and families, immigrants with work authorization, people with criminal records, and unemployed or dislocated workers are all affected by the requirements and variances of occupational licensing. There's been much ongoing news coverage and discussion about occupational licensing and deregulation. We've been tracking articles since January or February. There's an average of at least 4 national articles every day coming out in a variety of publications, everything from Forbes magazine to the LA Times to local. So it's a hot news item. We've covered well over 120 articles just in the time that we've been tracking this since the end of February. So we thought today we'd give you a little bit of insight about what some of this is. So the National Consortium is sponsored by a grant from the Department of Labor of $7.5 million. This program runs from October 2017 until December 2019. And on this consortium, it's sponsored by the Council of State Governments, acronym CSG, the National Conference of State Legislatures, the NCSL, the National Governors Association, NGA. So the Department of Labor, as they awarded this grant to those 3 groups, they put out a request for states to apply to be in this consortium. They selected 11 states to participate in this, and of those states, it's Arkansas, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Maryland, Nevada, Utah, and Wisconsin. Our governor asked me in August if I would be interested in participating on this consortium. I did not know what it was, and consortium wasn't part of my vocabulary until then. But I said yes, because I felt that if it was something to do with the board, it would be a good opportunity for us to be involved. So the occupations that they're studying, the way that they selected these occupations were focused on two primary criteria: occupations that are licensed in at least 30 states, and occupations that require less than a bachelor's degree, as well as two additional measures, which are projected employment growth from 2014 through 2024 at a national average or higher, and total current employment levels of 10,000 or greater. The process resulted in 34 occupations being studied, and states were required to focus on at least 4 occupations in their proposed project work. However, states can include additional occupations relevant to their own state's licensing landscape. In Nevada, we are studying HVAC, plumbers and pipe fitters, steam fitters, and licensed practical and vocational nurses and nursing assistants. So you probably can't see it, but the states that are highlighted on that previous slide that are studying construction trades, Arkansas, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Maryland, Nevada, and Utah. The other states have focused on other occupations. We've also included, and I'll be happy to give you a copy of this presentation afterwards so you can see it a little bit more clearly. So the consortium initiatives, the idea is to improve the understanding of occupational licensing issues and best practices in each state, to become familiar with existing licensing policies in each state, to identify licensing barriers for certain populations, and create state action plans that include strategies to reduce barriers and improve portability and reciprocity or licensure by endorsement for select occupations. The consortium structure, we have 3 national meetings scheduled for this. Additionally, we have in-state team meetings. So over the course of the 3-year initiative, this provides the state representatives with current research from the states, expert opinions, and best practices on the various licensing topics, as well as afford the states the opportunity to network and meet individually with their state members to develop their action plans. In between these national meetings, the states are charged with holding meetings and expanding the discussion to include our home team members. So there's the core team members who were selected, and then the home team members are actually, they provide input and ideas on that. So in addition to developing our state action plan, I'd like to share with you how each state is responsible for submitting a quarterly progress report, which all goes back to our national legislative associations and governors associations. So I'd like to kind of focus a little bit on the role that the boards need to play, all of our boards need to play in this process, regardless if your state is participating or not, because there is quite a bit of inaccurate and one-sided information that's circulating out there about licensing boards. So our first state meeting was held in Tucson last December. The majority of the attendees were legislators from across the various states, and the majority of the speakers represented anti-regulatory, anti-licensing perspectives. They talked about things such as criminal background checks being too complex for some of the applicants' experience requirements, financial requirements, fees, and the main topic is they believe that the boards are, or that the industry is self-regulated, which they are not. And when anyone asks us, are you self-regulated? The answer is no, we are not self-regulated. We are state-regulated. So my key takeaways from this first meeting were that there were very few pro-regulation speakers at this meeting, other than Dale Atkinson from FARB. The majority of the speakers no one was focused on talking about consumer protection. Very little. They started out the meeting by saying the boards were nothing more than cartels there to protect their turf. And I found that very offensive because, as we know, we are not an illegal group. So I knew from that point it was going to be a difficult 3-day work session. So I decided it was best if I remained silent and just tried to listen as best as I could. What's a little alarming about this is there are only 2 boards in the entire country that are on this consortium. It's myself from the contractors board. Did they lose connection, right? Okay. Myself and our nursing board from Nevada. There is no other board representation. So that goes for all of the trade, the 34 occupations we just mentioned. So at the end of the first day, I decided to go back and regroup my thoughts, figure out how I was going to deal with this. And as our own state team broke into meetings the next few days, I felt that it was best that I educate my own state about what we do and how we do it instead of listening to just the speakers that were there. Institute for Justice is playing a very large role in this project. The information that is put together for the legislative groups and the Governors Association initially was strictly coming from the Institute for Justice. As we looked through that information, it was inaccurate. They have stated that Nevada has the second most burdensome licensing requirement, and I believe California was number 3. And we're gonna go. Okay. I believe California was number 3, Hawaii was number 1. As you look through the information, much of it was incorrect. They were looking, I believe, at licensing of the entire state of different occupations. I had to go back to our core team and explain to them, and I have worked with a lot of these legislators for years. However, there was a general misunderstanding about what the purpose of boards are. So with that, my whole role in this is to, 1, educate our own state, educate other states about what you can do as this movement comes forward and how to correct your inaccurate information. I've met with NASPA. As Dave mentioned, I did go to your state and talk to your supervisors and management group about what this program means and what we can do collectively to work on some of the issues that have validity. So also, I was very fortunate that when we added our home team members, there was a little bit of light in the tunnel because they asked who I suggested for our home team members. So off the top of my head, I thought of the AGC, the Home Builders Association, the Mechanical Contractors Association, those that were affected by this. We also have some representatives from labor. So they had no idea that this was going on. Our local 525, buildings and trades, some of the nursing associations. And what's missing from this whole equation is there's really no one representing the general public other than our boards. So with that, bringing our home team members into our first meeting was very beneficial, so they could help explain what was going on as well. So we are working together closely with all of those home team members as well as our core team members. So our first home team member in January, or our committee member meeting and our team member, we brought in all of the groups, and I gave a presentation on who we license, that we do not license just the individuals, which was the perception of the consortium, that we licensed individual construction workers, which we do not license the entity, which could be sole proprietors, but also corporations who may employ thousands and thousands of contractors or workers. So again, we are trying, Nevada's decided to align our core team's mission with that of the state contractors board as well. And they looked at maybe this wasn't exactly the right option. Maybe they didn't select the proper occupations for this study because we didn't fall into their category. I'm sure a lot of you have heard much of the discussion revolves around hair braiders, florists, and they keep using that they're throwing all the occupations under one large net as far as the regulatory scheme. Well, I don't know about many of you, but I know nothing about florists. I don't know much about hair braiders either, but it's always the topic of these discussions. And what that has to do with contractor licensing, I'm not sure. Both the nursing board and myself, we were concerned and questioned why did they pick what we consider life safety trades to put into this mix as far as trying to figure out how to deregulate. As you know, the HVAC, electrical, mechanical contractors are all life safety issues. We am not picking on carpet layers, but why didn't they select carpet layers or something like that? We don't know why, but the information is coming on a national basis, and that's why they selected it. So after our first meeting, I felt fairly confident that we were on a good path to at least getting our Nevada team on board, and it's worked quite well. So our next meeting in February, what's the outcomes for the January meeting? And I'm sorry, Rick, I'm not doing very well with helping you on my slides. I jump around a lot. So all of our boards in Nevada are currently just completed a sunset review at the same time. So when the consortium started in August, we were not under sunset review. In November, we got word that we were under an audit from the executive branch, which we've never had before, and also a sunset audit at the same time. So what we've done as far as Nevada is we're using that as well as this consortium as a way to get our message out. It's time for us to tell our story about what we do and how we do it and the good things that the board does and that it is about the people. This is not about lessening the requirements. I mean, yes, there are things we can do and are doing to increase mobility and lessen some of the burdens, but we really need to tell our story and to tell it well. We're not here to defend what we do. We're here to justify it to some degree and tell our story. So as we're going around talking to different boards, I'm encouraging them to get with their legislators. If you have a state that is one of the consortium members, get with your legislators, get that correct information to them, get your stories out there, let everyone know what you do. It's not a good time to sit back and wait for this movement to take over because it is coming fast and it's coming rapidly, and it's time for the boards because no one else is standing up for the public. It's time for us to stand up and take some action. So in February, I don't have limited time, so Mr. Chairman is going to give me an edge when I'm talking too much. So in February, we looked at modifying some of our goals and our occupations. We haven't done that as yet, but now our home team is looking at Nevada's licensing and regulatory process as the model agency. They're thinking we need to start educating people how they can better license. At the same time, we're taking action within our own state to, again, reduce some of those barriers. So some of our efforts to reduce those barriers, we've expanded our exam locations with PSI so that we now a licensee or an applicant does not have to come to Nevada to take their exam, can go to a state that has a PSI facility to test. That was something we did without legislative change, without any approval from anyone. We just realized let's work with PSI and do that. So that has been, we now have 24 new locations that include the states of Arizona, California, and Utah. We're working on others for that. And also, so PSI has agreed to make accommodations for other states to accommodate those that are trying to do business in Nevada. So along those lines of our governor's bill, Senate Bill 69 from 2017 legislative session, which focused on license by endorsement, as Ms. Mathias mentioned, we were required to adopt regulations addressing license by endorsement, which was completed in February of this year. So those regulations expand our exam waiver requirements with other states across the country. We have similar requirements in place. Additionally, we're continuing to solicit information from various states about experience requirements, exams, and license classifications to best determine which states we have agreements with. So what Nevada has done is, instead of just relying on the core team or for the consortium, we started this before the consortium started, looking at ways that we can address the mobility issues and improve our licensing processes, and looking at our volumes of classifications that need to be possibly combined or whittled down, or we're taking a very progressive, active approach to what we can do. We've submitted legislation for this next session. We have 9 bill draft requests that are aimed at lessening the burdens for licensure. Some require financial reviews. We had some rather archaic laws in place that required a financial review every 2 years for new licensees. It was serving no useful purpose, so we're asking that be eliminated. Also, we're removing, the requirement for applicants to have relevant experience within the immediate preceding 10 years of the date the application was submitted, so that this will allow us to consider licensure based on their prior work history, not just a consecutive 10 years. Also, we're allowing our inactive status on licensees to remain in that status as long as they desire. We currently have a 5-year limit on that. That was another thing we looked at as, why do we need to do that? It didn't make any sense. So then we have some other housekeeping issues that we are providing. And internally, we're looking at ways that we can continue to work within our existing statutes as well, so that we can address the mobility issue and work with our applicants in coming from other states, but at the same time still ensure that our public is well protected. So that came out of our March meeting. So in our April meeting, the consortium came out with a national occupational licensing database, and this there's a little bit different information than the first round of information they got, and they're allowing the states to participate in providing into that information. So I would just encourage California or any other state to look at that database, because all of your legislators and governors and state agencies are looking at that to determine what your licensing requirements are in your state. So look at that, make sure the information is accurate, and if it's not, get with CSL and get the information corrected so that everyone is reading accurate information. Also, Nevada is taking a focus on workforce development through the governor's office. We have a lot of information about that, how that exactly relates to licensing and occupational licensing has yet to be determined. We are working closely with Dieter and Owen, which is the governor's economic development and workforce innovation committees, to work on different programs. They would like us to align some of our programs with apprenticeship programs. We are looking at all of that as well. So there's a lot to be done, but there's a lot that can be done outside of legislation as well. So our state now, I think, is on the right track as far as what we're doing. The consortium reports back to the national groups after national meetings. So again, it's really important that even though your state may not be included in this particular consortium, or they are, because this is something that they're taking back to all legislators. So it's just really critical that you can communicate with legislators, again, get the word out about what you're doing for the public, and keep drilling that message back home every chance you get, because that's what we're about. That's what occupational occupational licensing is about. It's not about turfs, as they like to point out. It is about the public, and I think all of us here know that. So now, Dieter in our own state, the Department of Training and Rehab, we just found out, submitted another grant application. There's another $7.5 million out there that has been put out to be awarded by Department of Labor for another study of occupational licensing. They were looking at the same exact things again. So Dieter in our state put in for a grant application. How that will pan out with this, I'm not sure. But I just think it's important that all of you are aware of what's going on nationally, because it is coming to all the states. It's bipartisan, as I mentioned. Initially, the group started out as a libertarian movement. Now it's worked its way over to the other side of the aisle. And what the general message is being relayed is that boards are keeping constituents and certain members of the population from working. And as we know, that is not correct. But that's the sort of information that we need to tell our stories and tell it well, as far as what we're doing as state boards and what we're doing across the country on occupational licensing and why it's so important, because it is an important component for the public, and it has nothing to do with most of the references that they're talking about. However, with that being said, there are many things that we can do to improve our licensing requirements, to improve our mobility, to improve our coordination between the states, and that's where we need to focus, is what can we do to lessen some of those burdens for applicants and licensees that wish to do business in other states. So, and that's sort of my wrap up, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Outstanding. Thank you very much, Margie. Is there any questions from board members in Sacramento or public in Sacramento? From here in Las Vegas? Public in Las Vegas?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, do you guys still maintain test centers as well as using PSI, or have you completely gone to PSI?
It's just PSI.
So it's not Reno and Vegas as the only test centers now?
No, they can take exams in other states as well.
Oh, wow. Any
We do
other?
have those in California. Nancy can probably address exactly what those are.
All right.
Yes, that's correct. That's a change we just made recently, and working with PSI, we were able to open up another 27 locations for taking exams throughout California, Utah, Nevada, and Arizona. Also make arrangements to take exams in other states. The only criteria is that it has to be at a PSI-owned site so that they have control over the security and delivery of the exam.
Outstanding. Any other questions? I did have one question. You were talking early on, they were talking about the criminal background checks and as impediments, whatnot. Knowing that you have that residential fund and contractors identifying as residential contractors, do they go through a higher level of scrutiny in the background check than, say, a commercial contractor in Nevada?
No, they don't.
All right, any other comments or thoughts? Certainly some things I think we could probably continue to work with Nevada, because I know, again, that's a big part of our directive through the Sunset Review is reducing these barriers to licensure. And although we're not part of the consortium, perhaps we could piggyback and learn from Margie and her team as we move on. Outstanding. Then we're going to go ahead and move on to agenda item C4, right? Or no, I'm sorry, C3, licensing and exam administration and national licensing exams. And for that, we're going to turn it over to California Licensing Chief. Yeah.
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. We back, Zach? Yep. All right, outstanding. Go to the Carpenters IT team up here, California's Public Affairs team here and in Sacramento. To accomplish this logistically is a pretty special deal. So thank you all for your efforts. And every once in a while, it's all right if we have to feed the meter. But while we're feeding them, well, the meter's fed, so we're going to turn it over to Laura Zuniga and Nancy Mathias, the California Licensing Chief and Nevada Licensing Administrator. I'm getting a lot of blank looks. We covered part of it, I think.
We did cover part of it, so maybe I can just quickly review a little bit about our exam program. I think it's very similar to California's in that we require each of our applicants to take both a business and law exam, and then in most cases a trade exam that's relevant to the type of work that they'll be performing. We currently contract that service with PSI, and they are responsible for both our exam development as well as its administration. Our program includes 76 exam titles. 75 of those are for, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you, Rick. 75 of those are for primary and secondary trade classifications, and then our one business and law exam. This has been a really good partnership for Nevada. It's a no-cost contract to our state. The program is funded by exam fees, and those are paid directly to the vendor, so we're not required to handle that either. The exam costs are currently set at $140 for an applicant that's taking a business and law exam as well as a trade exam. If an additional exam is required, then that cost is $95. Once our applicants are approved to take the exam, then they can go ahead and schedule the exam for the date and location that's most convenient for them. And they can do that using PSI's online service, which is available, of course, 24/7. Or if they prefer, they can go ahead and call their customer service support center. And that is open 7 days a week for applicants as well. We've already talked about being able to expand the opportunities for taking exams at a number of locations. That change was implemented probably 3 months ago. The response has just been overwhelmingly positive from our applicants. It's saving them both time and costs in terms of travel. We've used PSI since 2002, and we're extremely happy with the company, the services that they provide to us, and it's been a great partnership for us.
What role does the board play in the development of the examination at all, if any?
Quite a bit. Every year we meet with the team at PSI and we go through our exam program. We identify which exams need to be updated based on the pass and failure rates. They also monitor them to make sure that we're updating them in terms of code compliance and that sort of thing. When an exam requires development or updating, they reach out to us and we will provide them with names of subject matter experts from our state to participate in that process. And also the subject areas that we think are important to be included on the exam.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Yes.
$140. I'm sorry. $140, is that a separate fee from the $300 for the application and the $600? I guess your $600 is a total fee, right?
The application fee is $300. The exam fee is separate from that.
Anything else from Las Vegas? I think Chief Zuniga, do you want to talk about our process?
Sure, I can just give a very brief overview, and then I can have Wendy Balvance go into any more specifics if we have them. But CSLB develops all of its 46 licensing exams and administers the exams at our 8 computer-based test centers. So CSLB both develops and administers exams on its own. Each site tests 4 days a week currently, and exams are typically scheduled about 3 weeks out, and applicants also have the option of walking in to a test center to see if they can test that day. I can go into, do you want more details about the exam development process? I'd be happy to go into that if you'd like.
Can you talk, good.
Yeah, Laura, if you could provide a little background on how we identify subject matter experts and also how that may be similar to what they do in Nevada. I believe in Nevada that you do appoint the subject matter experts, but I think that would be helpful to learn more about.
Okay, I'm going to ask Wendy Ballvance to speak to that, so she's coming up.
How we identify subject matter experts, we send out recruitment emails and letters to see who of our active licensees in good standing are interested in participating in the process of exam development. We maintain a database for each of our trades, and we recruit people from that.
Well, just a little follow-up about establishing the occupational analysis, how they develop the exam questions.
Oh, the whole process. Okay. The main thing to know about it is subject matter experts, active licensees, are involved at every step of the stage. The first part is the occupational analysis, where we find out how the trade is being practiced, what are the new things that are happening in the trade. We have job audits where we go out and talk to licensees across the state. We have 2 workshops and a large-scale survey that go into the development of the occupational analysis, which goes into our validation report. That's just the first third of the work. Then there's 2/3 of the work is the actual exam development, where the contractors come in to workshops, review the questions, develop new questions, and at the end, set the passing standard. Was that what you wanted?
How does an occupational analysis perform?
How often? Every 5 to 7 years, with the new exam following from that.
Outstanding. Any questions, comments from board members here in Las Vegas or Sacramento, or public in Las Vegas or Sacramento? Seeing and hearing none. Moving on to enforcement, licensing, and public affairs collaboration and information sharing protocols and highlighted achievements. We'll start with enforcement. Missy Vickery and Jack Snyder, California Enforcement Chief and Nevada Special Investigations Supervisor, respectfully. Thank you.
Speak right into the mic. Pull it nice and close.
Okay, thank you very much, board members and executive officers and public. We're going to bring up a couple of instances where enforcement in Nevada has cooperated with enforcement in California. I do want to say before we start that the cooperation between the 2 states has been excellent, and we have a very good group of people who are communicating back and forth on cases that can affect both states. On March 3rd of this year, the NSCB was notified of a hotel casino in Reno that was undergoing a tower remodel. The complaint stated that many unlicensed contractors were working on the project. NSCB compliance and criminal investigators responded to the property and found a licensed general contractor had been hired to complete a 26-floor remodel project. A list of subcontractors hired by the general revealed that several were unlicensed. After documents were obtained, 7 cases were opened by the board. General contractor was licensed with a full B unlimited license. That general contractor signed a $454,000 flooring contract with an unlicensed contractor. That contractor was found to be in violation of NRS 624-700, engaging in business as a contractor without a license. The case was submitted to the Washoe County District Attorney for criminal prosecution. The company that was hired to install vinyl wall coverings for $317,970 was also unlicensed. That contract was found to be in violation of 624-700. That case was submitted to the Washoe County District Attorney for criminal prosecution. The electrician in that case was licensed by the state of Rhode Island, but not in Nevada. That unlicensed electrician had subcontracted a portion of his $460,000 contract to a licensed Nevada electrician. Nevada law under 624-700 does not allow an unlicensed contractor to subcontract to a licensed contractor. Based on document evidence, the NSCB filed criminal charges against the unlicensed electrician and filed administrative charges against the licensed electrician for contracting with an unlicensed entity. Fines and costs were levied in the amount of $2,450. The drywall contractor signed a contract for $1,944,742, was found to be licensed in Louisiana, but not in Nevada. A license application had been submitted with a license limit request of $225,000. That was submitted 30 days prior to the contract date. However, the application was still in progress. Since the drywall contractor had an app in progress, the violation was handled administratively, and a fine and cost was assessed at $5,500. Another unlicensed flooring contractor who had entered into a contract prior to his license being issued was given an administrative citation and assessed a total fine of $2,500. When the investigation was completed, the general contractor was charged with contract with unlicensed contractors. The general contractor was administratively fined $20,000 and another $1,500 in investigative costs. At that investigation, Nevada had contacted California Contractors Board because we had found that that same general contractor had won a contract at the Laguna Point Marriott in California.
Okay, thank you. So I'd first like to start off by quickly thanking Paul Rosario and Jack Snyder for the collaboration between the two enforcement divisions. We're grateful for your willingness to host the Western State meetings for the last 3 years. The Nevada-California partnership has proven to be very productive and successful. Now, on his update, we received the email from their board, and once we received it, we quickly realized that that same contractor had just finished the LAX Airport Marriott Hotel, and they were in contract for the Laguna Cliffs Marriott Spa and Resort in Dana Point. So once they shared the information, the problems they had with their contractor, they suspected he was probably doing the same things in California. So we contacted our labor enforcement task force partners, and we went out there and performed a sweep compliance operation. On May 3rd, CSLB, along with the LATF partners, conducted the inspection of the project. It concluded that there was an unlicensed electrician contractor on site that had entered into a $257,000 contract to perform electrician duties. That resulted in a referral to the DA for contracting without a license and an administrative citation for the private contractor who entered into the contract with the unlicensed contractor. In addition, other findings with our partners included OSHA found 2 serious and 12 minor safety violations. DLSE issued 1 stop order, 3 orders to appear, and 2 citations totaling over $43,000. Employment Development Department referred one employer to an EDD audit. And that concludes my update on that. Jack, you and I earlier discussed another example of our collaborative efforts. Would you like to talk about this, right?
In March of 2018, the United States Contractors Board received a complaint from a small business owner that had contracted the purchase and installation of a commercial paint booth on his property. He contracted with a California licensed contractor out of Paramount, California. The complainant's contract dated September 7, 2017 was in the amount of $90,000. The complainant paid the contractor a deposit of $50,000 plus another $2,222 for a guaranteed installation date no later than December 31 of 2017. A record check revealed that the contractor was not licensed in Nevada, but he did have a valid California license. The guaranteed install date had come and gone, and the complainant was having trouble contacting the contractor. The investigator spoke to the contractor, who indicated he was waiting on delivery of the booth the manufacturer. Investigation revealed the manufacturer had no booth ordered because the contract had failed any payment for down payment on that booth. Records indicate the cashier check in the amount of $52,220 was cashed on September 11, 2017, just 2 days after he received it. Based on the document evidence identified in the investigation as well as payments received, the investigator had probable cause to file charges with the Clark County District Attorney for misdemeanor contract without license and felony obtaining money under false pretenses. The contractor was licensed and active California contractor. The investigator would allow the contractor to submit an application for Nevada contractor's license and return the funds to keep up the complaint. After verification of the refund and license application, the contractor would have been issued an administrative fine in lieu of a criminal complaint. After initially agreeing, the contractor stated he was not going to comply and said, quote, "Do what you have to do." On March 28, 2018, felony criminal charges were submitted to the Clark County District Attorney for a warrant of arrest. Contact was made with the California Contractor State License Board investigator, Matt Boyd, regarding the contractor. The NSCB was advised to notify California once we have a conviction in hand.
Missy, would you explain what the LETF is, and why it was important that they went out, and how this lead helped you to establish the justification to send out a task force like that?
The LETF is the Labor Enforcement Task Force. It's our partners that we go out with, EDD, DOSH, Department of Insurance, and others. And we go out there and we assess the situation, and everyone's looking for their specialty. Somebody's looking for, employee safety issues, workers' comp, California contractor's license, so we can maximize the use of the force and our collaborative efforts on a site where we know that there's people on an uneven playing field. So we try to level the playing field and take care of the underground economy together.
Very good. Mr. Chair, I'd like to insert some things here. I think that it's great that California and the Nevada Board regularly share information, and that the investigation that they brought to our attention because of the problems that had surfaced in Reno assisted us in catching the same contractors violating laws in California. Contractors as such often operate in both states, and staff sharing information in this foundation of the successes that we both share information in addressing these violations. I want to thank the Nevada Contractors Board for bringing this information to our attention, as well as the assistance in checking businesses that licensed California contractors apply for reciprocity in California. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. Is there any other board comment or question from here in Las Vegas?
Mr. Chairman, I do want to make
Yes, please.
a quick comment. And maybe it's kind of a question or an observation, but I've had the situation before happen to me with a general contractor and work being done on the strip where the owner is not aware of the fact that they hire somebody that's not licensed, because the direct contract is with the owner and the contractor. And so is there any violation that is then assessed to the owner because unknowingly they have contractors working, a general contractor that's hiring non-licensed contractors, or is that not anything that really does affect them other than maybe acknowledgement of the fact that they had non-licensed contractors on their job?
In California, we really don't go after the homeowner, but we try to educate them on the importance and the danger that they can come into contact with by hiring someone who's not properly licensed or insured. We were talking yesterday about if you hire someone who doesn't have workers' comp insurance, the liability for you as the homeowner. So we try to educate them.
Yeah, the owner gets, if they're using unscrupulous contractors, that's a challenge.
sometimes, and I'd be interested in Nevada's statutory scheme if, oh, I got Chrissy looking at me. It's gender related. We have a disgorgement provision in our statutes where if an owner knowingly or unknowingly hires an unlicensed contractor, they could receive back all the compensation they paid, he or she. Is there something similar like that in Nevada?
In Nevada, if an unlicensed contractor works on a project and it doesn't get paid by the owner, it has no recourse in court. It can't bring a lawsuit to collect any funds because it's unlicensed.
But does it have an affirmative? Would that owner have, let's say it's a $50,000 contract, they paid that contractor $25,000. Can that homeowner sue that contractor under your statutes to recover that $25,000?
There is no statute I'm aware of, but certainly that would be
California Contractors Board does not have any jurisdiction against the property owner if they hire somebody that's unlicensed. There is a partnering state agency that Betsy referenced, that's the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement, and they have jurisdiction over anybody that would employ somebody to make sure the wages are paid. You'll very rarely see them take action against a residential property owner just because of the political fallout. But if it's, I've seen some real estate agents on some properties or it's commercial, they will take action against a property owner for hiring somebody that is not licensed because of their view. That would be an employee relationship. Therefore, they would need workers' compensation insurance for them, and they would have jurisdiction over the property owner.
Outstanding, thank you. Any further questions from the public? Board members? Seeing here and none, moving on to Laura Zuniga and Nancy Mathias. Did you have anything to add on collaboration licensing?
Thank you. Just quickly, I too wanted to thank Laura and her team for their willingness to share information and ideas concerning licensure. Also, as we have those discussions, we always find that we're facing similar issues and struggles. One of those is documenting the experience qualification, which we've talked a lot about today. And then the other one is that there are a large number of applications we receive that just aren't complete. And so lately we've been collaborating on ideas as to how we might simplify those application forms. And that's just really been helpful in our state. We've looked at the form, and what we found in Nevada is that we had included a lot of informational text that we thought was helpful, but we found out it was really just confusing the applicant. So we've scaled way back on that and tried to make our forms much simpler so that they're just focusing on providing us with the information that we need in order to process that form. We don't know if we'll be successful in those efforts. Just time will tell. We're trying to move in that direction. And I think Laura and her team are doing similar efforts.
I just want to thank Nancy and the staff in Nevada. They've been a great resource to us in California and helpful to have ideas to bounce off of. As she said, we have similar issues with our applications, particularly the return for correction rate. And we're in a similar state to Nevada in that we are trying to totally redo our application. Like Nevada, we have a lot of informational text that we feel is probably confusing to the applicants and isn't helping them in completing the application. So we're close to getting a completely revised application approved and then hopefully ready for use later this year. Thank you.
Any questions from board members and Vegas? Board members in Sacramento, public Vegas. Seeing, hearing none, call up Rick Lopes and Jennifer Lewis, both here in Las Vegas, California Public Affairs Chief and Nevada's Public Information Officer.
Good morning, everybody. Since we last met, just a couple of the highlights that the Nevada State Contractors Board has worked on, kind of piggybacking off of what Nancy reported with licensing streamlining. We've worked with the licensing division to create a licensing application video. It kind of mirrors or assists, if you will, our business application or business assistance program, which I'm not sure if you're aware, but it's an in-person 2-hour tutorial that basically walks applicants through our application and gives them a very in-depth overview of the requirements to ensure that their questions are answered. It gives them that one-on-one with our licensing analyst. So the licensing application video was an online resource we wanted to make available that just kind of highlights on the key significant areas of that application that applicants need to be aware of, addresses some pitfalls to avoid that are commonly made that can delay the application process. So that's now posted to our website. We also, not to jump ahead, we also have some other videos that we've established for disaster preparedness, which I'll get into on our next item. Other initiatives that we undertook this year were to translate all of our collateral material into Spanish, something that the community in our state was asking for. We also developed 2 consumer public service announcements in Spanish that highlight the importance of hiring licensed contractors, and I've promoted those to the relative communities in our state. Some of our continued efforts that we've spoken of is our home improvement forum. I think I mentioned at our last meeting. This is a program where we bring together industry representatives to sit on a panel to help convey the message of the importance of hiring licensed contractors. The uniqueness for this in terms of homeowner representation is that they get to have that one-on-one dialogue with industry representatives. So they get to ask specific questions about electrical, plumbing, HVAC questions, pool questions, things that we can as a contractor sport relate to and answer, but it certainly bodes well coming from the industry directly. So it shows that collaboration, the partnership, and helps to advance our message. We've continued our senior awareness program. We also participated in a construction career day. Along the lines of the Consortium initiatives, as Ms. Green mentioned, workforce development is a key focus for Nevada in terms of the governor's office. So efforts like the Construction Career Day, and we had a buddy bench program where we collaborated with local high schools who developed through their own construction means buddy benches, and the buddy benches aim to reduce bullying efforts in schools. That's a tool for elementary school kids to use, but it helps the students to promote their construction needs, and in return, we were able to promote our Commission on Construction Education, which provides educational grants for construction-related programs throughout the state. So that Commission on Construction Education is really our best effort to promote that workforce development in terms of enhancing the state's resources for that matter. We also provide a lot of training to our city and county personnel upon request. So this gives us an opportunity to meet with their contracts personnel folks that are actually hiring individuals on a state and local perspective. They have a lot of unanswered questions or are unaware of the services that we can provide and assisting them proactively with those services. So it's a very good dialogue. They often run from 1 to 2 hours depending on the customization of what they're looking for. But we are working on that. We've also participated in a consumer fraud prevention fair. So there's a lot of fraud initiatives and task force in Nevada that hold monthly meetings. We participate in those, and this fraud prevention fair is just one other initiative that we can collaborate with our state and local partners. I wanted to also mention, we haven't done it as much, but we are now participating in fire station events, and I found this to be a really unique opportunity to really connect with the community and to connect with the family members and children to really educate them about the importance of the contractors board as it relates to their community and keeping each other safe. So we've had a good turnout with that and look forward to continuing those efforts. Some of our upcoming initiatives are really going to be focused on the consortium initiatives and reducing barriers to licensure. With that, from the public information side of the house, we're really looking at enhancing the accessibility to our information. So we will be taking great focus on our website, hoping to streamline and make more accessible the information. With Nancy's point, to simplify that information, there's a lot of content on there, and we want to make sure that the public has not only content-related access, but we're going to enhance our video and more visual-based representations. Some of those tools that we'll be using are going to be looking at webinars, and I kind of chatted with Rick about how he's had success with that, so we'll be collaborating with him a little bit more on their efforts. and then looking at different ways to diversify our message through the various mediums that we've already had in place. Any questions? Homeowner
This
events,
meeting is being recorded.
we tend to get an older community. It's not so much your new homeowners, and I find that these events really draw on the younger parents or younger adults. I don't know how you would classify it, but the family oriented. And so you're really getting a chance to kind of diversify with interact with a different age group, if you will.
Just to add that, so like, are you providing them with literature, or are you doing any kind of skits, or what exactly do you do at that type of event?
Yes, we do provide literature. We are able to have those one-on-one discussions with homeowners about the importance of hiring contractors, answering their questions about upcoming projects that they may have. We look for the opportunity to give presentations when available. It's not always an opportunity, but certainly we make that request when we're able to. And on a side note, I would like to note that I'm really proud, and I know I don't think we mentioned it at our last meeting, but Margie was recognized, I should say the board was recognized for our Metro Chamber of Commerce for a Business Excellence Award this last year, which was significant because I don't know that a government agency of our type has ever been awarded that, but it focused on a residential recovery fund initiative. So I just wanted to put her on the spot for that because I think she does an amazing work, and that was all her concept. So, but to your point, yes, the fire station events are really probably the most community-centered in terms of the folks that we can see and we can reach out to.
Just a quick note. Congratulations on your newest family member.
Oh, thank you so much. He's a cutie.
Thank you. I got to turn the camera here. Okay. Thank you. We do enjoy the great working relationship we have with our friends at the Nevada Board. Jennifer and I talk on it varies. It could be as much as every week to maybe every month or two, but we're always in constant contact, especially if there's cases that we're dealing with or we need help. We compare notes. We talk about new outreach ideas. We talk about things like software and other things, tools that we're using. And so we appreciate not only being able to share what we find out, but enjoy working with Jennifer and Scott and her folks to get the messages out and to share our messages and share good practices and best practices. Jennifer did mention the workshops they have for job applicants. We do have started up a similar program here in California, where we do monthly workshops both in our Sacramento headquarters and in our LA office in Norwalk. That it's a couple hours. Sounds very similar to what you're doing in Nevada. We have undertaken that as well. Obviously, with the last year, a lot of our efforts were focused on disasters. We're going to be talking about that in a few moments. Our public affairs office played a big part in that. We'll, again, be able to touch on that. The other thing that we're excited to, that we launched in January was a new website feature. You've got something similar in Nevada, but we're excited about it. It's new for us. We, for years, have had the online license lookup where you can look up the status of a license and find out license information. But we weren't able to give consumers a place to start when they wanted to find a contractor. So with this new feature we're calling Find My Licensed Contractor, you can go in, you can put in your zip code or a city name and the type of contractor, whatever the classification is, hit the search button, and it'll give you a list of all the current licensed and active standing contractors in that classification in your area. We're going to be making some expansions, so maybe they can put a 25-mile radius and do some other things, but right now it's limited to just a specific zip code or a city. And we launched that in January, so it's great that we are now going to be able to do it as far as is to do a lot more publicity on this to let the public know it's out there. It is on the homepage of our website, and without much notoriety, I think we talked yesterday in our meeting, averaging about a month, about 57,000 hits to that page. So if people are noticing that it's there, and I think as time goes on, that's going to be a great service and a great way for us to promote, where to start off your search for a contractor. So we're excited to talk about that. As far as some other things that we are doing and looking ahead over the last year and looking ahead to the future year, we are doing a lot more outreach with building departments, podcast, video production. We're looking to expand that. Again, the disasters, unfortunately, that's probably not going to end. Again, we'll talk about it in a couple of minutes, but we are involved in workshops that we're doing right now, not only for consumers, but we're actually doing workshops for contractors as well. And the importance and the reason we're doing that is we're trying to reach out to contractors, not only those who have a workers' comp exemption from us, because as part of trying to get disaster-related work, they may think about expanding their business. So we're talking about how to get workers' comp, how workers' comp works, going through that process. Maybe they might want to add a license classification. So we have our licensing folks talking about how to add a classification. We talk about enforcement, some of the things that we see as the biggest problems, reasons why people file complaints, what's required to be in contract, everything that we can think of to try to protect the consumers by protecting these guys and reminding them on the front end of what they need to do so they don't get themselves into trouble. We've had pretty good feedback from the contractors attending those, and so that's been successful. And we're going to be doing our next one actually in Ventura County with the big Thomas fires down there, which I've heard about. So that's just a little bit of an overview. We'll talk more in disasters, but again, I just want to emphasize how much we enjoy working with Jennifer and Scott and everybody at the board. Thanks for the opportunity, and thank you for welcoming us here to Nevada.
Outstanding. Thank you both very much. Are there any questions from any board members here in Vegas? Any public here in Vegas? Any board members in Sacramento? Public in Sacramento? Seeing here, hearing none. I do have just one quick question. I saw somewhere in the book, and I hope I'm not getting ahead, where we caught one, we did a sting. Is that coming up later in the program? Never mind. All right, moving on. C5. California, we've been hammered with natural disasters, especially over this last year, floods and fires. And here to do a brief update about our response, both in media and enforcement, to these natural disasters is Susan Granzella, California board member, Ed Lang, California board member, and chair of the enforcement committee. 4th, 5th, 9th, whatever. And then Rick Lopes, chief of public affairs. So turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've had the honor to serve as chair for public affairs in the last year. Thank you, Rick. No one has ever said I was quiet. So I'll get closer. And so thank you very much it's been a pleasure working with you in the last year. So the background for our presentation is on page 379 of the big book from California. And I'll start with 2017 and early 2018 will long be remembered as a time when natural disasters changed the face of many California communities. It was highlighted by the most devastating string of wildfires in California history, followed by deadly mudslides and debris flows. These natural disasters were responsible for the deaths of at least 67 people and the destruction of 10,700 structures. The disasters also prompted one of the largest coordinated response efforts in our board's almost 90-year history. The efforts are outlined in the meeting packet, and we have staff who can address any specific questions you have about the response and the various partnerships we've been involved with. Our efforts continue, and as far as our outreach, last week our staff conducted a workshop for contractors in the burn areas in Butte County in California. Next week we'll conduct a series of workshops for both survivors and contractors in the burn area in Ventura County. We also have extensive enforcement efforts underway, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. Now, the first step to rebuilding after these disasters was to clear away the debris. That process is very close to being finished. Right now, we'd like to show you a short video on those efforts. This video was produced by the California Office of Emergency Services. Rick did ask me
one day after the October 2017 wildfires erupted in Sonoma County.
We were 99% complete as of today.
having removed 2.2 million tons of debris, which equates to nearly 314 square miles of fire area that's been cleared.
A momentous update given the magnitude, complexity, and self-imposed time frame for the debris removal process.
From the beginning of this very catastrophic, very devastating event, the response has been a one team, one fight effort.
A similar accomplishment and announcement the very next day in Ventura County.
The county, the city, the state, and the federal resources all coming together as a team and fighting back. And the cooperation was seamless. We moved more than 18,000 firefighters through our fantastic mutual aid system and all other kinds of assets to roll into and try to minimize the overall losses, but there were losses.
The ferocity and unstoppable nature of these fires and the debris flows that followed in Santa Barbara created a cleanup and recovery challenge not seen in California since the 1906 earthquake. Combining the accomplishments of the debris removal projects from the Northern and Southern California wildfires, teams have removed a total of nearly 4.5 million tons of debris from 5,221 parcels. It took 7 months.
Huge efforts working with local public works, county offices to get mud debris moved out, get Highway 101 open, working with Caltrans. Monumental job.
The Tubbs and other fires in the north.
We want to celebrate what we've been able to achieve, but we also want to assure the people that we serve that we will continue to advocate for them, that we will be there for them.
The Thomas Fire in the south.
40 days this fire burned, and the destruction that it laid in its wake was absolutely unimaginable. The work that was done by our first responders, our government agencies, was nothing less than extraordinary. This is government at its finest.
Historic wildfires in nearly every way, and historic debris removal efforts to go with them.
I want to thank all of those parties, people behind me, but more so really right down at the local levels, and the opportunity to work with the public works people in Santa Barbara and in Ventura and the city and their representatives, because without those solutions coming up from the bottom up, again, we wouldn't be as successful as we are now.
Moving forward, after the debris has been cleaned up, we're going to still continue to remain here through the process of helping our communities rebuild.
Visit our online.
Okay, can you hear us?
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, can you hear us, Sacramento?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
What you're probably wondering, what was enforcement doing during this time? Our enforcement efforts began while the fires were still being fought. Enforcement staff were on foot in the burnout areas and in local assistance centers, helping educate our fire survivors and to begin laying the groundwork to support for the construction industry and from our partners' government agencies, including Department of Insurance. Although we had staff hard at work in all the fire areas around the state, the sheer size of the destruction in the wine country north of San Francisco forced us to devote many of our resources there. These enforcement efforts have included dozens of sweeps operations where we have investigators stopping at active job sites. And it also been a great opportunity to encourage the licensed contractors we have come across to help us and be our eyes and ears. Enforcement staff has also responded to dozens of tips regarding unlicensed activity or possible contractor violations. We've also conducted 2 undercover stings operations. that resulted in arrest and almost 24 suspected unlicensed contractors. Contracting without a license as a declared disaster area can be charged as a felony, and district attorney's offices are very aggressive about using felony charges. I can tell you that in the North Bay wildfire zones, we've taken almost 60 enforcement actions against licensed and unlicensed contractors. That includes 40 referrals to the local district attorney's office and issuing 80 administrative citations. That's like
outstanding. Thank you very much, not only to the enforcement, public affairs, all the first responders throughout the state of California dealing with unprecedented natural disasters. Are there any questions or comments from board members or public here in Las Vegas? Questions or comments, board members or public in Sacramento? Seeing and hearing none, we're moving on to C6, construction industry and enforcement trends. And I turn it over again to Mr. Ed Lang, Ms. Missy Vickery, and Jack Snyder from the Nevada Board.
I'm going to give you an update on solar in Nevada. Nevada continues to be one of the top solar states, most likely because of the amount of available land, and some of which is leased by the federal government for utility scale solar. And the number of sunny days per year we have, which averages 294 a year. Since 2009, across the country, the cost of solar PV prices dropped year after year, leading to the rise of residential solar installations. In 2015, the Nevada Public Utilities Commission changed the net metering rates in Nevada, making the leasing or purchasing of solar not cost effective to the homeowner, and caused a serious setback to the residential solar industry in Nevada. The effects of the decision put approximately 2,500 workers out of work in the residential solar industry. The overwhelming majority of solar companies either moved out of state or went out of business, with many of them walking away from their commitments to customers, leading to license revocations and or residential recovery fund claims towards homeowners. The change in net metering rates did not negatively affect the utility scale projects and or growth in Nevada. In 2016, Nevada ranked 4th in the nation based on cumulative amount of solar electrical capacity installed. Last year, Nevada Assembly Bill 405 was signed by Governor Sandoval. The bill revived the net metering program in the state and also carries some consumer protection provisions for homeowners. This was the first bill of its kind to guarantee residents the right to self-generate electricity and also set precedent for consumer rights as energy producers. Although Nevada previously had net metering in place, new rates established by the PUC in 2015 were too low to incentivize Nevadans to install solar panels on their property. With AB 405, however, residents who produce more energy than they consume will be reimbursed for their excess energy at a 95% of retail electrical rate. In addition, 405 ensures a slew of important rights for residential solar customers, including the availability of detailed rate information and every system sold or leased through a power purchase agreement. The bill meets Nevada's goal to have renewable resources making up 40% of the energy sold to customers by 2030. More companies that moved out of state in 2016 have now returned. In 2017, Nevada maintained its number 4 ranking behind California, North Carolina, and Arizona. The change in net metering rates have improved the residential solar industry, which has been in a steady increase in installations since 2017. Of concern to NSCB investigations is the business model of selling and negotiating solar installation contracts by third-party unlicensed entities. This business model is used and permitted in other states. However, under Nevada law, only a licensed contractor can contract for the installation of a solar array. And under Nevada law, a contract with an unlicensed contractor is considered null and void. The NSCB has and will continue to work with these unlicensed companies to get them licensed and operating within the state. We have also educated the licensed solar and electrical contractors about entering into agreements with third-party unlicensed contractors. As expected, with the increase in solar sales within the state, come the increase in complaints to include systems not operating to the degree in which they were promised. Leaking roofs, installation time taking too long, promised rebates yet to be received. After Summerlin Energy left over 100 victims with financial losses in the state of Nevada, the NSCB was quick to react to a company called Legend Electric with their complaints. The company was revoked in August of 2017 for financial. Information was later received that the owner and qualifier of Legend Electric was also the qualifier for a company called Legend Solar, a solar energy contractor licensed in Utah, Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, and Washington. Fraud unit made contact with the Utah and Oregon construction regulatory boards, informing them of the connection of Legend Electric and Legend Solar. Both states requested a copy of Nevada's decision and order on our revocation. After the license revocation, the license qualifier continued to take money from Nevada residents on solar contracts that he knew could not be completed. Felony criminal charges were filed against him and arrest warrants have been issued. According to the Salt Lake Tribune, a Legend Solar, a once highly regarded solar company who had been involved in large charitable contributions and sponsorships that included naming stadiums, team sponsorships of NBA and college teams, has left dozens of homeowners without solar energy systems that they purchased. Reports reveal that company executives receive salaries up to $500,000 annually, and top salespeople gross up to $30,000 a week, while material invoices were going unpaid. Oregon and Utah had 128 victims, and Nevada had 11. Case updates as of June from both Utah and Oregon reveal that the qualifier and Legend Solar Company have been revoked in Utah and suspended in Oregon, awaiting a revocation hearing. We were not able to obtain any information regarding criminal complaints or civil actions in those states.
So as discussed yesterday during day one, CSLB has established a solar task force to handle the solar complaints, comprised with 1 supervisor, 2 investigators, and 2 consumer service representatives. I covered much of this yesterday, but it's important to acknowledge that the solar industry continues to grow rapidly in California, and it has presented some issues for consumers. In 2017, there were 116,000 residential solar installations, and in 2020, all new single-family residences that are 4 or fewer stories will be mandated to have solar installed during construction. In 2017, there were well over 100,000 housing starts in California. It's hard to project the amount, the $10,000 increase in solar cost to purchase will slow the new housing starts in 2020, but CSLB will continue to monitor trends and work closely with industry to ensure that we are prepared to address the consumer complaints that may arise due to the requirement. CSLB has identified 33 contractors who have received approximately 40% of the solar complaints, of all the solar complaints. Some of the issues we are encountering in California relate to contractual misrepresentation by unregistered salespersons, complaints related to contracts negotiated in Spanish but written in English, homeowners entering into power purchase agreements that charge more for kilowatt hour than the local utility provider charges. The Solar Task Force has focused on settling complaints when there's an absence of a major violation. As a result, nearly $2 million has been returned to consumers for financial restitution. Since January 2016, 306 solar-related complaints were recommended for further disciplinary action. This is 21% of all solar complaints closed. That concludes the solar update.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. Any comments, questions from the board here in Vegas? Public here in Vegas? Mr. Chairman. Yes.
I did have just a couple of comments. My understanding in California is part of the changes in the construction industry is that is it going to be required that all houses be sprinklered, anything new being built? And I also had heard that there was a potential for all new houses also having to have, be retrofitted or fitted for solar. Is that also true?
In 2020, I know solar is going to be required if there's 4 or fewer stories, but I'm going to refer to Nancy, our building official, as in regards to the fire.
Right, so that's going to be in our 2020 code, the 2019 California code that goes into effect January 2020. What that is, it comes through the California.
Nancy, could you get closer, Nancy? I'm sorry.
It comes through the California Energy Commission requirement. However, it's going to be hard to do, but there could be the case where if they run their energy calcs, they may be able to put other features and not have the solar. So it's going to be rare, but there is a potential that you don't need it. But most brand new single-family dwellings will be required to have solar on rooftops after 2020. Right now, what we do is we have a code requirement that states that you have to do certain features to have it solar ready.
Okay, that was legislation that was passed to require that. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Some of it was legislation, but it was really through the code adoption.
So it's a mandatory requirement that's going to take effect. So
Yes, sir.
You can't opt out, but you have that.
You can only if the energy counts, you can meet other features, but it's going to be hard to do. I have to say that because there is that option, and if somebody gets that right mix, then they won't be required.
Outstanding. Thank you. Anything else from Las Vegas? Anything from Sacramento Board? Sacramento Public? Seeing and hearing none. We've been requested to do a quick break, so it's 10:03 here. Let's reconvene at 10:15, 12-minute break for people to right, so here we are, bringing the meeting back to order. We're at agenda item C7, which is proactive enforcement. And I believe we're going to start that with a video. Is that? No, we're not going to start that as a video. We're going to start that with Mr. Ed Lang, Missy Vickery, and Jack Snyder again for agenda item C7, proactive enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After all of the information you received a few minutes ago, during this time, the transit criminal activity and enforcement strategies, CSLB routinely send enforcement representatives to training courses that addresses the ongoing issues surrounding transit criminal activities. Most recently, in November 2017, CSLB sent 4 staff members to attend a 2-day California State Certified Criminal Gypsies and Travelers Training 2-day seminar conducted by the GRIFOG training group. Investigators learned that the main element for successful investigation and prosecution of transit criminal activities are, number 1, detailed knowledge of methods of operation. Number 2, taking immediate and aggressive action when first becoming aware of potential crimes. When staff returned to their office, they gave presentations to the other staff to share invaluable techniques. Once we make contact with transit criminals, from common strategy is to get the state as quickly as possible. To address this, we immediately notify our networking partners in border states, provide them with identifying information on the suspects as well as their equipment and vehicles. This has proven to be a highly successful strategy. Last year, we shared a video with collaborative efforts of CSLB and NSCB catching a seal-coating traveler who was victimizing consumers. Because these criminals they travel from state to state, victimizing senior citizens, we make sure that we communicate with our Nevada partners. Thank you.
Okay, so taking it from there, staff from the CSLB SWIFT unit and Nevada board conducted a joint sting operation on May 16th and 17th. The first day started off in South Lake Tahoe, and the second day was in Zephyr Cove, Nevada. On the first day, the California side, that sting resulted in 10, notice 2 appears, 1 DA referral, and 3 stop orders. The highest it received was for $21,700 for pavers and gutter installation. One suspect failed to show up at the California sting, but showed up next day at Zephyr Cove. And Nevada Contractors Board will talk about their efforts. They nabbed him over there. So, day 2, Zephyr Cove, Nevada. You want to talk about that?
Investigators of the Nevada State Contractors Board and California Contract State Licensing Board worked a combined effort sting operation at Lake Tahoe on the 16th and 17th of May, identified as Border Blitz. The combined sting netted a total of 16 unlicensed contractors who either submitted bids or advertised trades without for work that does require a license. In Nevada, licenses are required for any work that exceeds $1,000 in labor and material or requires a building permit, is part of a larger project, or falls under plumbing, electrical, HVAC, or fire protection. The Nevada sting was conducted on May 17th at Zephyr Cove. 6 persons were issued citations into criminal court. 2 were cited for contracting without a license, 2 were cited for unlawful advertising, and 2 were cited for both contracting and advertising without a license. The California sting was conducted on the 16th, and she's explained what went on there. But I do want to say that the unlicensed person who failed to show at the California sting did show at the Nevada sting, and he was cited into criminal court. So.
And I just want to add one thing. In addition to the stings, we're conducting compliance sweeps in the area. We swept 31 job sites in South Lake Tahoe. This resulted in 3 cases being referred to the DA for contracting without a license, as well as 1 for no workers' compensation policy. That concludes our update.
Outstanding. Any comments from the board in Las Vegas? Any comments from the public? We got a video. Well, here, let me ask for questions or comments from the public here. Board members there in Sacramento, public Sacramento, video, Rick will stand by.
Yeah, technically right now I don't have no license, but I can, yeah. Okay. He's gonna make this one here? Yeah, exactly. Right here. Right here. You wanna use the same trick you got in the front? Yeah, if we can use this map, that'd be perfect. You can do that? Yeah, it's a little different color, but because that one is old and the new one is new. So it's gonna be like a 40 feet. 40. How long do you think it might take you guys to do? Do that this one? I'll take it like a week. A week? Yeah. We need it like a 50% down, and we're gonna make that little contract, because you guys, will rent your money, and then, Okay. So we make a little contract. Down, so it's gonna be $10,000. Okay. And do I make that out to you? Yeah, I'm looking to me. The contractors board is this sting operation.
The importance of our agencies partnering to increase consumer protection for the citizens both of Nevada and California are innumerable. Suspects that are people that are committing crimes in Nevada, can easily and transiently come across the state line and commit the same crimes.
Especially in this northern Nevada, northern California area, there's a lot of crossover between the two states with the unlicensed contractors. We're going to deal with the same people up at Lake Tahoe and in Reno and Truckee that they're going to deal with in the same places. So sometimes we'll get to know them, sometimes the California guys will know who they are. It gives a little more background, a little more comfortable. They're a little more comfortable when they're dealing with the people.
My guys fluctuate because I don't keep them full time. Okay. So I, go from job to job and stuff like that. That's kind of a tough thing. Right. You got to have 3 forms of income. Right. But I think we could get it done in like, a week or so. A week? What we spent on it. It's getting chilly. So we're looking at about $5,000 in labor. About $5,000 in labor? Okay. Cool. Which is good. That's a good fair deal. Yeah, no, that's fair for sure. And it's not including staying and stuff like that. It's just building the whole thing just for the labor. Okay, and what do you think lumber-wise? We're looking at maybe $2,000 in lumber, I'm guessing? Probably about that. About $2,000, okay. $2,500 in lumber. Does fencing take any kind of license or anything like that? No. Okay. No, it's just a fence. There's no structural value to it. There's no way that you can do that. Okay.
I don't do too much. You mean like organizing that? No, not at all. So I'm investigating with the board. I figured out I got that limit. Yeah.
We're just learning their methods. This is the first time I've been able to work with CSLB in a joint operation since I recently started with Nevada. I know how we do ours. We've been to a couple of ours. But seeing how they do theirs, the amount of resources they put into theirs, and the amount of people they bring, and the ways they deal with people, we end up talking to people about the same. It's generally the same end result with the getting the proposals and how you to speak to people, but getting a chance to see 3 or 4 other people interact with unlicensed contractors has also been pretty informative.
Is getting licensed something that interests you, because we can help do that too?
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, I checked out a few different things like that. It said Sacramento was offering something with a...
So Sacramento, actually, we just started putting on seminar classes type of thing. So it's once a month. It's like the third, I have a flyer for you. I think it's the third Friday of every month. And what they do is they put on an entire seminar with a PowerPoint presentation, a question and answer segment where you can sit there and ask whatever question you want. They'll answer whatever it takes. And in regards to licensure, they'll give you an application. They'll give you all the different kind of stuff.
We had a suspect who had come over the state line to provide a bid, was issued a notice to appear in court, and actually brought an employee, did not have workers' compensation insurance, and the suspect articulated that in Nevada, that they don't need workers' compensation insurance for their employees, which turned out to be, glaringly incorrect, because we're able to talk to one of the Nevada Contractor Board investigators who, quickly dispelled that myth. So having them right there to dispel some of these myths that these suspects will often tell us is helpful.
So that's the first thing.
If I was looking any bid over $500 in law states, I'd have to have a contract with.
The time and material or the overall value of the project cannot be over $500. Okay? Your business card, on your business card, you're advertising for work that requires a contractor's license.
So I can't even do that.
Well, you can if you put on here, not state licensed or unlicensed. So,
And even then, the worker can only be under 500.
so you have an advertisement issue, you contracted without license, and you have an employee without workers' do you have workers' compensation insurance? So that's another kind of separate deal. So we got three things going on.
That unilateral sharing of information strengthens both of our agencies, really, and makes us more effective in protecting the consumer.
This meeting is being recorded.
There we go, we live?
Yeah, you're good.
All right, any further comments or discussion on the video? Vegas, Zach? Seeing, hearing none. To the enforcement people, thank you for all you do. You, your teams, first responders, the frontline people out there. It's if you haven't been on a sting and have the opportunity, I strongly encourage it. It is amazing to hear the accused, they're innocent until proven guilty, give you all these excuses and reasons why they're doing what they're doing and justifications. It's mind-blowing. So thank you for what you do out there protecting consumers both in Nevada and California, which brings us to our last discussion item, which is C8 on the agenda, contracting online for home improvement, the online marketplace. Board member Susan Granzella, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The background for this item is on page 399. Wanted to put this in as future consideration, current future consideration. In the past few months, CSLB has been heavily invested in addressing emerging issues involving online marketplaces and contractor referral websites. In March, the San Francisco District Attorney filed a civil false advertising suit against one of the referral websites, Home Advisor. The suit alleged that the company broadcast false and misleading radio and television ads to consumers that state or imply that background checks are performed on all service personnel who go into a consumer's home. Last week on May 30th, a Superior Court judge in San Francisco granted a preliminary injunction against the company, prohibiting it from broadcasting ads with those claims. Turning to online marketplaces, in its most basic form, these are e-commercial websites that link consumers to products or services from multiple third parties, where the e-commerce operator processes the transactions. Here's basically how an online marketplace works in the home improvement industry. Let's say you want to buy and install a new central air conditioner for your home. You go to a website, purchase the system. Next, you search for HVAC installation, and the website gives you the price to install the new system. After the work is finished, you pay through the website, which takes it back and forwards the rest to the contractor. So, isn't the website acting in the capacity of a contractor and therefore need to have a license? The company will likely say no, that it is simply the platform consumers use to hire a contractor and for processing for getting payment to the contractor. So our position would be yes. In California, a contractor is defined as any person who undertakes, offers to undertake, or purports to have the capacity to undertake, or submits a bid for construction or demolition of any building, home improvement, or project to himself or herself, or by or through others. Therefore, persons engaged in the business of home improvement must be licensed in the appropriate trade before advertising and/or submitting bids for construction and construction-related services. Our board recently issued an advisory, which you see in the meeting packet, which is page 399, starts on, to help clarify our license requirements and why they are required to be licensed. That's the end. Yes, so new territory for all of us.
Thank you very much, Susan. Is there any comment or question from the board? Mr. Diaz, Dave Diaz, HVAC. For the Nevada board yesterday, Mr. Diaz was the hypothetical bad contractor. But we know that he's not a bad contractor.
Thank you. Yeah,
Great.
The chair won't go that close because of my fat body. But anyhow, that was when you said something about where they can go online, and I guess they have all these contractors or whatever it is. Listen, so you go online, you hire it through online, and then they pay the contractor later. Does a permit even have to be pulled or closed out? I mean, there's a lot of things we need to really look into on this about that, because on HVAC, which I know about, is that you have to have a permit to do almost all the work on HVAC. So, and then you have to, closed out. And now the utilities in California for give a rebate require a closed out permit to be able to give the rebate on energy efficient furnace or air conditioner. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, absolutely. A permit's required, has to be final. So the question though is when you're dealing with an online marketplace, the consumer is often confused as to who the contractor is, and they're dealing directly with the entity that established the online marketplace. And if that's who we generally are going to look at as a contractor. Any contractor that's performing work on the project, doing the installation, would need to have a permit in place before doing that work, because they're in violation of California law.
But wouldn't that online marketplace need to be registered as a HIS? And when we have excessive down payment issues, if they're collecting funds up front, et cetera, and there's a whole host of issues here.
There's a lot we're looking at. There's two ways an online marketplace can work. In one way, they could be a referral for a licensee. And it's really generally not the problem that we're having, but if you're representing someone for a home improvement contract, you would need to be a registered salesperson for that entity, so there's no misunderstanding. Where we have a problem that we're looking at most closely is where you have an online marketplace where the consumer believes that that's the entity they're contracting for. This is an entity that is telling the public they have the capacity, we'll use the HVAC, to have an HVAC unit installed for them. They're not able to vet the contractor that's doing the installation because they're dealing with the entity that established the online marketplace. And that's where there's consumer protection harm, because a contractor is simply showing up to do the work. And as you point out, they may or may not be getting a permit. They don't know who that contractor is. If they have a problem, who are they going to go back to? They're going to go back to the entity that established that online marketplace and who they paid. they argue it's simply pass-through payment. Well, it's not. You're paying that entity, you believe you're dealing with them. They're telling the public they have the capacity to install that HVAC unit either themselves or through other, and that's the definition of a contractor in California.
I have one question. Do they actually sign an online contract when they engage with these entities?
What happens is you generally establish a relationship with the entity that established the online marketplace, and that provides for the payment to be run through them. It's our understanding, though, some of the business models that are being used has a licensee going out to the project site with an app that's on a phone, as an example, where you would just sign an initial that you accept this. It doesn't comply with California law as it relates to home improvement contract form requirements. So there are other violations that are occurring. And in your packet, you'll see that we have the fast fact sheet that we put out that lays all of this out, because we want to make sure there's no misunderstanding as to these entities that are established in these online marketplaces. What they're doing is taking a cut of the contract. They need to understand what the law requirements are. We also have to protect our consumers. So this benefits both the consumer and the contractors that are involved.
Thank you. Is there any other board member comment or questions? Linda?
Yes, thank you. So this is different than these like Home Advisor or even Craigslist, where somebody's advertising as a contractor or somebody's advertising to hook you up with a contractor for whatever you need. In other words, they're not vetting what it is the service that you need. They're saying if you need a contractor, here's a list of people that have been basically vetted, right? I'm wondering if that vetting means we've also verified that they're licensed.
Well, some of those entities with referral services do a good job in vetting to make sure that they are licensed. That would not necessarily fall under our jurisdiction. It's not unlawful to have a list of contractors for which a consumer can identify contractors they may want to work with, and then vet them on him or herself, go to our website, check them out, be in control of the process. That would be legal to do. So that's something that's separate than what we're talking about with the online marketplaces.
I've never heard of this. This is bad.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to follow up with that, especially on including the online marketplace requirement. We have today an attendance and representative from Home Depot, Scott Harrington, Stephen Pacino, and Ed Barrington. As a consumer protection agency, the CSLB greatly appreciate the Home Depot commitment to consumer protection and the effort that they have been taken. Moreover, their participation in the National Association of State Contractors License Agencies, NASHLR, professionalism and accessibility to CSLB staff have been beneficial in addressing multi-state regulation issues and this subject of online marketing marketplace requirement. That's all I have.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. Is there any board comment from Las Vegas? Additional public comment in Las Vegas?
Mr. Chairman.
Can we get Pastor and then I'll get to you? Is that all right? Pastor, you're on.
Yeah, Dave, I don't understand how the consumer, or maybe you could walk through how a consumer is contacted by these online people. Do they see an online ad, or how does the consumer know about these companies? Do they get a call, or what's the operation of these organizations?
Well, it happens both ways, and we're not at this meeting going to identify any of these entities that have established that.
But how does the consumer kind of work with them? How do they know that? How does the consumer contact them?
Yeah, it's because of solicitation, and there are businesses that operate nationally that are establishing them. So not in a position here that we're going to name anybody. We're not naming anybody, but it's out there. It's growing. It's becoming just well known within the public community that you can go to an online marketplace, but we're not going to be able to name any businesses here in Pastor.
No, I wasn't asking for names of business. I was just wondering how consumers get contacted by these companies, or how does consumer find out about them? But I guess...
Yeah, online searches, and many times it's a company that you've already established a relationship for. You've established a relationship with the company, and so now they're not somebody you may think of would even be doing construction, but now they've established an online marketplace to provide services provided by licensed contractors. They argue they're providing a service. So it's internet based. It's available on the internet through internet searches, and because of relationships that you've already developed with various businesses.
Are these companies just kind of fly by nights? Are you getting complaints against them?
Well, we are getting complaints. I would not suggest that they're fly by night. I don't have that evidence that they are. The problem, though, the underlying concern is we want to make sure that our consumers can make a solid decision. They can vet the contractor and they know who they're dealing with. And in these situations, they don't. And so that's a significant concern. That's why we have that fast fact sheet that we're hoping will help to lay out what the requirements are when you establish these online marketplaces. They need to be licensed. They need to make sure they have workers' compensation insurance. They need to get building permits. They need to comply with home improvement contract form laws. And the last thing is when somebody's dispatched out to sell a contract, they need to be a registered salesperson in California that's home improvement.
I agree 100% with your proposal here, and I'm glad that you're doing that. I just didn't understand how their MO is here and reaching consumers and consumers contacting these type of entities. That was my question. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Pastor. I think we had a comment up here.
Yeah, you kind of intrigued me a little bit with your comments, because I'm thinking now about like American Home Shield, and they're a national company. So when you have a home warranty program and you need a repair, and then you call, how do you know that you're getting a licensed contractor? Do they vet them, or I don't know? Just curious thinking that, because that's a whole nother situation that can occur in the home.
Absolutely. Any other comments from Las Vegas? Public, board, SAC, public, board? All right, seeing that is the final discussion item of the day. I want to first thank the Nevada State Contractors Board and their staff for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them just so that everybody understands what we're doing. I believe Nevada is going to go through the adjournment process. We're going to come back. The California board is going to have its staff guided tour, which will commence about 11 o'clock. There will be no further discussion of that tour. After that tour is done, it's going to be a presentation in here. We're going to adjourn, and in compliance with Bag-Keenly, there was no more board discussion once that happened. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chair Jan Leggett.
Go ahead.
Kevin, thank you very much. We'd like to thank our California colleagues for joining us here in Las Vegas this morning. Welcome to Nevada. It's great to have you here. We are going to go through the adjournment process right now. Is there any public comment here in Las Vegas regarding the Nevada board? Hearing none, seeing none, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion to adjourn with a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion to approve. This meeting is closed. Thank you very much.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. All right. So again, thank you to the International Brotherhood of Carpenters for hosting us. I also want to do a bit of fond farewell to Ed and the pastor. Again, the only business we're going to do is watch the tour, and then we will adjourn. So Sacramento, we're going to grab lunch. We're going to start the tour at 11 o'clock. And Chrissy's looking at me like I just committed a felony.
No. I'm just trying, I'm a little confused. So are you gonna do the tour before lunch or?
We're doing a working lunch. There is no union agreement that precludes a working lunch here, no? Okay, so this is a duty,
You're all management, you guys do whatever you want.
exactly. So this will be a duty-bound meal period.
So we'll do a lunch break.
We're gonna grab lunch out here, we're gonna bring it in here and start the presentation at 11, at the tour at 11.
Okay, so we'll need the Sacramento members to stick around until the tour presentation's completed. So we have to have both meeting locations open until the tour presentation's concluded.
Which I think they're good with. We can entertain a motion to adjourn now, can we not? We can do a quick tour of this way.
Well, it's on the agenda.
Yeah,
It's on the agenda for both meetings. So
Okay, they're staying, okay, wonderful. All right, everybody, lunch was served out here. I'm sorry.
Question? Is there a reason why we?
Yes, John.
Yes, what is the reason why we can't adjourn now? I'm not trying to.
Because we have a tour on the agenda.
I see.
And so we're gonna do the tour starting at 11, which is gonna be about a 30 to 40-minute presentation from the members about this amazing, and I mean that amazing training facility.
Is the whole tour on the agenda?
So then the plan would be to adjourn around 11:30. Yes.
That's the
But
weirdest
it's the
thing I've
fact
ever
that we have two meeting locations, and by California law, you have to have both meeting locations open with a board member present in each location in order to be in compliance with the Open Meeting Act. So, I mean, if only one stays, we're still good, but we need at least one board member to stay in Sacramento.
Well, you know, Joe does live in Sacramento.
All right, so with that, I invite the board to grab lunch outside, bring it in, and we'll roll from there.
They have it there, right? They have a quorum there? They have a quorum.
Sure. Hey, Pet Store, this is Rick. Can you hear me okay? Can you wave if you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Can you please pick up the phone and call Dave?
Dave who?
Either find a phone or just give him a call real quick.
Dave who?
Dave
Why don't
Folks.
we all go to lunch, and they'll have to
Thank
wait
you.
till we get back.
I'm headed for the airport. See you guys later.
Hey, not fair. All right, have a good summer, you guys. Really safe travels. Yeah.
I don't understand why we have to wait here while they take a tour. I mean,
Yeah, really, but,
well, do you want to flip for who stays?
Oh, you have to fly. Go.
We'll hang out.
That was nice of you, Pastor.
I mean,
No longer.
I'll stay.
How long are they gonna be?
he's taking his tie off.
Maybe they
But you're-
can text us when you're done.
Pastor, I'm trying to get Dave's cell phone number.
Who wants to call who? We have to call who?
I think Dave wants you to call him.
Call me?
Yeah, do you have his cell number?
I don't understand, maybe Claire knows.
Yeah, I have it somewhere.
Okay. Sounds like that's what he was.
Oh, is that what he wants?
I think he's probably, I don't think he understood what you were asking, so he's probably trying to clarify it.
Oh, no, I just wanted to know. I mean, I had never heard of these schools,
Yeah,
you know?
no, I get it, I hear you.
You weren't asking who, you just wanted to know how.
we run here at the International Training Center for our members and our partner contractors. Then I'm going to turn that over to Jim Bodica, who is with the Partners International Training Fund, and he's going to talk about what they do here at the International Training Fund and what they do in relation to all of our training centers across North America. So if I'm going to have a PowerPoint, those in the front are going to have to kind of sit around and look up at that. As I go through this, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt me, or if you ask them at the end, I can answer them there as well. So, and pardon my voice, I was at a hockey game last night. Clicker doesn't seem good. There we go. Right. So, from the Department of Education and Training standpoint, all of the programs that we develop, we work on these 3 strategic priorities that were set by our General Executive Board. And so every time we're looking at putting a program together or content for those, we want to make sure that they are supporting what our General Executive Board has it for the future of the community. So with growth, we're either, as any organization or any living thing, you either grow or you die. And we know that we need to, as an organization, grow. And that's not just bringing in new contractors and new members, but it also involves retention and keeping the contractors we have, keeping the members we have, and doing all we can to help those already in the fold with us and bringing those that are not in and supporting that. Skill and professionalism, those are the 2 things you're going to hear about this morning. I'm going to talk about the professionalism side, because the Department of Education training, the training we do is all soft skills. And then you'll hear from Jim from the International Training Fund. They oversee the skill training, those items our members need to be on the job and perform the work that they do. And the last one with organizational effectiveness, it's just like it sounds. We want to make sure that everything we're doing is supporting the organization, but we're doing it in the most effective, efficient manner, because this is our members' money. And we want to make sure that we're spending our members and contractors' money to the best of our ability to support the organization. And ultimately, as an organization, we are looking to achieve 70% or more market share. And it's a lofty goal, but we know that if we can achieve 70% market share, it's going to help our contractors secure more work. It's going to help our members work on those projects. It's a win-win for everyone moving forward. So when we put the programs together, I'm going to run through the drivers that we use in the development process. My boss, Randy Eppert, has a PhD in adult learning, and he brought that to the department back in 2011, that we don't want to put programs together where we sit people on the lecture hall and read to them out of a book, especially with our members. They're more hands-on, they want to do things, so we're constantly looking at the adult learning model to make sure that we offer some activities and things that keep them involved. Emotional intelligence, this is something that's been a buzz for a while within the corporate world. And we looked at some studies, and we just started incorporating an emotional intelligence assessment into our latest program. And it really is to give people self-awareness. We use other assessments, but the EQ, or emotional intelligence, is one we just implemented into our newest program. And just to give you a little insight into emotional intelligence, when you look at the makeup of a person, there's 3 things: the IQ, your personality, and your EQ. And the numbers that are on the chart there really is something that jumped out at us. And your IQ stays relatively the same throughout your life as compared to your peers. So at age 7, compared to your peers versus age 77, your IQ is relatively the same. Personality, by your early 20s, your personality is developed. That's who you are. The neat thing with EQ is it is something you can mold, change, and improve on. And when you look at those numbers of job performance, and this is across all industries, this isn't just construction, you can see that 60% of job performance can be tied to someone's emotional intelligence. So if we can help our members improve their emotional intelligence, that's going to help our contractors with their more productivity goes up on the job sites and ultimately profitability for our contractors. So that's when we looked at this, we realized that it could be a benefit not only to our members that have the self-awareness, but it will help them when they're out working for our contractors. Focused reinforcement, we're constantly working with our programs and giving our participants time to practice. An example, we don't call it role play, we call it skill practice, but we let them have conversation. We're doing communication skills in small groups and give them a chance to practice the skills we're giving them while they're here before they get back to the job site or even in their personal life. Facilitators and instructors, we constantly are improving and educating our pool of instructors. We currently have 11 full-time instructors and 62 part-time instructors. So even our part-time instructors that we bring in from councils all over North America, now that while they might only be here 6, 7, 8 times a year, we do offer training in classes, send people at conferences constantly to improve their skill set. Increased accountability just comes with education. We look at our members today, you have the education now, you have the awareness, and now you're accountable for what happens when you leave here and go back home. And consistency is something we weave through all of our programs. I mentioned communication skills. That is something we weave in pretty much every one of our programs, so that everyone can improve on their communication skills. And again, while it'll help on the job site, it also helps in people's personal lives as well. So the programs I'm going to run through, this is a short list of what we offer as a whole, but these are the programs that we offer for our members and our partners in the industry, meaning our contractors. First one, delegate training, just so you're all aware, our organization structure changed back in 1995 when President McCarran took over. And having a representative democracy in the sense that our members elect delegates that go to a council level, represent those members at that council level in the direction of where that regional council is going. So we have a 4-day program to bring the delegates in, explain their role as a delegate, how they are an integral part from that bottom up, from our membership up, making sure the council is going in the right direction, while you've got the general executive board at the top of the international overseeing those councils and setting goals and planning, but the delegates have an integral part to make sure that goes forward. Third-year apprentice program. This program started back in 2007. And a 4-day program, we bring in 180 third-year apprentices each session. In fact, we had one that started yesterday from the Southern District. They're over in the West Building. This program, first of all, why 30 years? We looked at, and the General Executive Board, working with the International Trade Fund, looked at our apprentices. And the first 2 years of our apprenticeship, we're losing about 50% of our apprentices. And most of it is not due to anything we're doing or the industry is doing in general. But there's people that sometimes come into the trade not knowing they have to work outside and it might be cold and it might be muddy. So that's where we're seeing a lot of the drop off. And a lot of our local training centers are doing more now in those first and second years to keep them engaged and in the system. But we realize when someone gets to the 3rd year of their apprenticeship, it starts to become a career. It's not just a job. They're looking at this now long term. So we're bringing them here 4 days. We focus on 2 key parts of that program. The first is the industry. Partnering with our contractors and how their skills, but more importantly, their attitude, are really going to be the drivers for success for them personally and for our contractors. So we focus heavily on the first day and a half about the industry. We talk about perceptions, misperceptions that are out there, things they hear on the job, because they are new to this trade in this industry. And on the second day, we had a contractor panel. So we bring in contractors from the area these apprentices are from. We have about a 2-hour question and answer that they can ask these contractors about running the business, what they're looking for in future leaders. So they're hearing it firsthand. And the interesting thing with that is before we go into that panel, when we talk about these misperceptions, we ask these apprentices, at the end of the day, what is the average net percentage of profit for our contractors? So factoring in the job sites, factor the office, the lights, the gas in the trucks. When you factor all that in, what's the average net percentage, we still have apprentices thinking contractors are making 90% profit. So there's a bit of misperceptions there. If we have people on the job site thinking our contractors are making 90%, that's a problem. So we really focus in letting them understand, hearing from these contractors, and when they hear 4%, low single digit profit on a job site, they understand how their productivity can really affect the job. We switch gears in the second half of that program. We talk about us as an organization, give them the big picture so they understand the organization they belong to. Most of them went into a local union or a local training center join. That's their world. That's what they know. We make sure they understand the councils, the districts, the international. We go through the history of the brotherhood, how we started, how we grew over the years, the things we did wrong, the things that we're correcting, and where we're going to the future. We then get into a 5-year development plan with them, because now it's becoming clear. We start challenging them to think, where do they want to be 3, 4, 5 years from now? And whether it's moving up in the company, being involved in the organization, but it starts them thinking now that, yes, this is a career, and where's my career going? This program, the general president used to close this program out. He now opens it on Thursday. And early on in this program, he was speaking with a group from the East Coast, and we had a female millwright apprentice stand up and say, this was great. We met these, a lot of people. We're going to have committees. We're going to stay in touch. The problem is we're going to go back to the job site tomorrow, and we work for a bunch of Neanderthal journeymen. So, 100% right. So that got the general president thinking, the general executive board, and we developed the Journeyman Leadership Program. That program, again, is a 4-day program. We're bringing in 180 journeymen at a time for that program. It is our largest program to date. We started that in 2011, and we just went over 35,000 journeymen through that program across the U.S. and Canada. This program focuses on transformational leadership. And, there's the slide up here kind of spells it out. We've got a lot of contractors that have been successful for years working under a transactional type leadership model. And there's an exchange or a corrective model. Exchange is show up for work out 8 hours, I'll give you 8 hours of pay. It works. And people get their money, they show up, make sure the work gets done, they go home. Corrective, a little bit, I should say, a little worse than exchange, in the fact that it's more about trying to just fit in and not be singled out, not get yelled at, not, if you have a foreman that's just going to find somebody yell at everybody else and then toes the line even more. It's a successful business model. We have companies that operate under this, and they're good companies. But when you start looking at transformational leadership and those 4 behaviors that are listed there, it's really about getting people involved and ultimately getting the buy-in from the workers or co-workers to actually want to make a difference, feel that they're wanted there, that their ideas matter. And it's really, when you look at transformational leadership, it's not about positional power. So this isn't, you're doing this because I'm a foreman, but it's more intrinsic for these people. And it's, people have personal power over others in the sense that I might be very influential on the job, and I might be one of the top people on the crew, but if I can help the others get better, I'm helping myself. So it's not because I'm the foreman that happens. So it ultimately ties to culture on the job site. And when you have those transactional type leaderships, you have that corrective or exchange, you get either an aggressive defensive style culture or passive defensive style. And we use this model because it resonates well with our members. They all know that corrective solid. It might be missing some teeth and bent up. It's going to cut through the 2x4. It might smoke it. It'll get you through the 2x4. But it's not really that great. And what we want to do is get up to that constructive style culture that yields the highest productivity on the job site. When everyone's involved, everybody knows the goal, the mission, and pulling in the same direction. And that's ultimately what we want our people in the field to understand, that their productivity is going to drive profit. And if the contractor is successful, they get more work, that's more jobs for others. So I mentioned that 35,000 in the pool of the Journeyman Leadership Program. We just rolled out the next level Journeyman, the 212 Journeyman Program. We actually about 2.5 months into that, so it's really new for us. This is a program where we're using the EQ assessment, we're using the DISC assessment, if any of you are familiar with that, for the personality and communication style. So we're just giving these journeymen that have been here for the first level, that next level of education, giving them more education to build their career, build their personal self moving forward. And just a little background on the name, because this is about the people that went back after this original program, got involved, are doing more, maybe stepped up on the job site. But the 212, it comes from a video that talks about the extra degree. It talks about 211 degrees, while it's hot, when it hits 212, it boils, boiling water creates steam, the steam can power a locomotive. So we talk about how one extra degree can make a big difference in their life and in their career. So again, this program is very new. We've only run a couple hundred people through this, the fact that we just rolled this out. So with the journeyman program, as I mentioned, it's more about positional, or not positional power, more personal power. We had journeymen stand up and talk to the general president, because he does speak to them as well and takes their questions. And similar to the third-year program, we had a journeyman say, hey, this is great, but I'm not a foreman. You know, I'm not a superintendent. I'm going back to the job. The foreman's going to say, hey, I'll pay you from the neck down, just get the work done. So we started some foreman training. And currently the program we have for foremen is a 4-day program that really focuses on the processes of running a job. So it's really about setting your crew up for success. It's for current foremen within our companies that come in and get ideas, tips, and thoughts on how to improve their work and ultimately setting that crew up for success. We offer that specific to industry. We offer an interior systems, foreman, concrete, scaffolding, pile driving, and we're rolling out a millwright foreman program in 2 weeks. So that's specific to industry because we actually use job sites, we use prints, schedules, plans, and we use something from the industry that they can actually all relate to, that they come from, and we use that to do the activities with that program. So foreman, we're actually in the process too of developing a foreman leadership program, and that one it's on the drawing board. I'm not sure what that's going to look like. That possibly could be a long-term program over a year or 18 months where they come a couple times here, but a lot of it's done back on the site. So we're working on hopefully rolling that out late this year or beginning of 2019. So as the other programs went along, there's some councils that have foreman meetings, and they went back and they talked about what's happening in a specific geographical area and what's happening on their job sites. And so they all had discussions, and we started to hear that, hey, this is great. We've got our crews set up for success. We know what we need to do to make them successful, but there's a disconnect between the field and the office. And, you know, I asked the office to send me some material, some equipment on Tuesday so I can keep the crew rolling, and it doesn't show up until Thursday. So now I have people sitting home, and it's just some of the disconnect in the office. They don't understand completely what's happening in the field and how that's creating productivity. So the general president, general executive board came to us as a department, and we put together one of our newer programs, is collaborative leadership program. This program is unique in the sense that we bring in the participants for this. It's a smaller group. It's 100 per session. We do this. It's a 3-day program, but these participants are from foreman level through the owners of companies. So this is a program where the UBC
This meeting is being recorded.
Project managers, safety people, VPs, owners that are not members of our organization but are partnered with us. The general executive board felt strongly enough about this that we're picking up the cost to bring that. So that's unique in the sense of training we're offering within the industry. This program, it's the fastest growing program. Again, I mentioned it's 3 days. This one, there was some hesitation early on by contractors to send in their people. So they would send in a foreman or a superintendent with a VP, maybe even the owner would show up. And on the third day, they would come to myself or one of my instructors and say, hey, this was great. I've got 15 people in the office. So we ran into a supply and demand issue with this program. So we started offering it, we were started off as Friday to Sunday. We are now offering it Monday to Wednesday as well. Because we did hear from some contractors that say, if I'm going to have my people, out of the office, I would rather have them out during the work week than have them do a personal weekend. So it worked out well for us here because all of our other bigger programs are on Thursday to Sunday. So Monday to Wednesday are slow days. So it actually was kind of a win-win for everyone. So this program, fastest growing, like I said, once a contractor gets in that program, they realize there's value in having their office personnel aligned with what the field is doing. And that's the goal that the general president, general executive board said is we want to make sure from the owner down to our apprentices that everybody's aligned, going in the right direction, which is really about driving productivity that brings profitability up for our country. So the collaborative program, instead of giving you a run through on what it entails, I've got a short video. These 4 bullet points are the key component of the video. We'll talk about it. So it's just as simple for you to do that and let you see the video.
While our members may have vastly different skill sets, they all share the pride and commitment of being the most highly trained in the most up-to-date theories and methodologies, tools, installation procedures, and safety measures. And this also includes leadership skills. Leaders participating in the newest program, allowing leadership, building job site leaders, will focus on 4 key areas of learning: entrepreneurship, leadership as response, the culture of collaboration, and communication skills for leaders. This place is awesome. This facility is wonderful. The people that we meet, the networking, the school, the school they will go, and have alumni, and we'll go back to the farm. It's a great program, and I think that's some great news. It's an amazing thing to me that as the being governor, this is what we get to come to. The training facility and the trainers, very educated on the subject matter. Of course, I have to use that I can give this up. Every facet of the program will give the attendee very specific information that will enhance their knowledge, creating new opportunities and making it more competitive. The entrepreneurship portion of the program will provide tools on how individuals at any level can create a strong personal brand that makes their private and to be essential. They will also enable them to develop strategies for using personal power to build strong collaborative relationships. Leadership as a response aims to stimulate and inspire followers to reach beyond what they thought possible and elicit extraordinary results. It looks to achieve true commitment and involvement from the phone board by involving his or her self-worth into work. The culture of collaboration on the job site curriculum creates incredible value where the culture and structure encourages workers to engage one another, make decisions together, improve processes, products, and services in concert regardless of level, role, or position. A sense of ownership builds commitment and ties into the big picture. The last component of the program is critical communication. By focusing on strengthening communication skills, participants develop a keen external awareness that separates the truly great communicators from those who struggle through their interactions with others. I found this profile very informative, not so much for what it told me about me, but what it told me about how I know other people. Working together with up here, you get similar position, you get to see that, wow, how fun. The team that ends up winning is the team that's right. In today's competitive industries, the United States continue to make big investments in our strongest assets, our members and contractors. The collaborative leadership program is a game changer within the industry. offer contractors and members a chance to build relationships and strengthen communications on the job site. Creating a constructive culture is essential in today's market. By joining together, we are focused on skills to maximize productivity and build stronger job site leaders.
So ultimately, in what we're trying to do here from the Department of Education and training standpoint is bring the employers, our members, the union together, all pushing forward to establish a 70% market share, to create more work opportunities for our contractors and more opportunity for our members. So with that, I can take any questions if you have them, and if not, I can turn over to Jim.
Yeah, the guy that you asked on running down the hallway, was that for safety?
No, that was, so you can kind of see mixed in there, we do an activity, and that was, when I saw the video, I was like, really, the guy with the busted arm running through the hallway, so, yes, good pick up on that.
I think he was one of your sheet metal guys.
He had a cut.
Unbelievable.
So I appreciate again all of your time and being here. Oh, sure.
I was going to ask you a question. It looks like everything you created is from the bottom up, so the top down, which is good because it's a process in case somebody that's just getting into the business or into the trade. It shows them all the levels. My question is, when they finally get to that top level, do you see a high percentage of guys that finally go, ding, why am I working here when I can go out here? I've got all these skills, I've got all this training. I can go out and start my own business, hopefully, and do a better job and compete in the marketplace against other contractors because I got all the skills that I do out here.
Not that I'm aware of, but I haven't seen it. That would be something more probably from the council level, like from Northern California, like the council would probably be the ones that would see that more than we would. More power to them if they do. And that is something that's come up in the past. The question has been asked to the general president, is there anything any programs you can do to show us how to start a company? How do we become a union contractor? So there's been a little bit of talk about putting something together to give our members the information on how to do that. The one thing with the 212 program, we have a game we call, it's actually a board game, but it really is about the business acumen of how our business is run. Kind of behind the scenes, our members see what happens on the job site. This gives them an idea of what's happening in the office and the money and what happens with supplies, what happens with slowdowns with weather. And it really opens their eyes of what our contractors deal with. I can tell you that there's been comments, and again, that's a newer program, that some of these members are like, I don't ever want to be a contractor. Once they see the inner workings, we pull the curtain back. So, but again, if our members decided they wanted to do that, hey, more power to them. Yes.
I missed the first part of it because these guys didn't get the memo. You're not supposed to wear anything but a t-shirt after 11. But anyhow, with sheet metal workers in Northern California, we have 40% of our people, I think, are going to get retired within 8 years. And I'm assuming you guys probably have the same issues. Is this addressing some of that as well?
So, and I think everybody has it. It's not even just the construction industry. I think everyone has that attrition coming in a quick fashion. Well, that is one of the things, from our side, because we started with a third-year apprentice program. So it really goes back to the local areas. And Jim's going to touch on a program that the International Training Fund does, Career Connections, which is really looking for that future workforce. But that is something with our tiered and continued training, like the third-year program. With this great recession we were in, or depression in the construction industry, we scaled back on that. We were only bringing in about 1,000 or 1,200 third-year apprentices a year. But we looked at those numbers. In fact, I just, last week, we're working on next year's calendar. We've got about 6,500 second-year apprentices in the system right now. So for next year, we ramped up some of those programs for this year, but next year for the third-year program, I'm looking to add quite a few more. Because if we can get them engaged out here with that, knowing, hey, there is when you turn to the journey level, there is another program. There's another program after that. If you move up into a foreman role, if you move up higher. So from our side, we are looking at that, but I know that on the local side, and Jim will talk about that Career Connections program.
I have a question. This is Pastor from
Good. All right,
Sacramento.
with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Bodica from the
Can I ask
National
you a
Training Fund.
question real quick?
Thank you, Chair, very much. Appreciate
Hello? Could I ask you a question
Good
real quick?
afternoon. My name is Jim Bodica. I'm a technical coordinator here, have been for the last 18 years at Carpenters International Training Fund. So we'll get into this PowerPoint and we're going to go through this rather quickly because I know you want to get on a tour and I don't want to bore you with all the training that we do, all right? So,
Hold on a second, stand by.
it's all because of this gentleman.
Sir, if we can stop for a second, I'm sorry, I pulled down Sacramento, but they did have a question, so if you can stand by for just a moment, I'll bring Sacramento back up.
Thank you, Rick.
Stay with us. Thought they were done talking.
I think we lost Bob.
Stand by just 1 second.
Thank you, Rick.
Come back for you.
Rick, can you hear me?
Okay. Let's hope we have. Pastor, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Just a quick question.
Can you hear us, Pastor?
I can hear you, but can you hear me? Hello?
Stand by a second. Leave it to Pastor on his last meeting.
That's okay. Don't worry. It's a good going away.
1 second here. Yeah. Thank you. No. So Pastor, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Can you hear me?
Technology is great when it works, isn't it?
2 full days and it's the last minute. He can hear us and he can see us, we just can't hear him right now.
I'll do some sign language if you want.
They can't even see us.
Pastor, what's your question? I'll write it down and put it on the camera.
No, I want, just basically.
Hey, can you take the phone over to Pastor and I'll have him do it over the speaker here? Stand by here. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, here's the question.
The enrollment in your apprentice program, what is the ethnic?
1 second, Pastor. Hey, go ahead. 1 second.
Could be on there.
I'm gonna do the old fashioned.
Hey, go ahead, Pat. I hear you now, Pastor. Go ahead.
Could you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Pastor. We can hear you.
Okay, just briefly, just wanted to ask a question concerning the apprentice participants. What is the ethnic breakdown of the participants and how many women are there? Got it?
That's a great question, and I don't have those statistics.
Oh my God. This is so like, it's a great question, and I don't have any information.
Click. Hang on.
I'm leaving. They hung up on me, that's it. Well, that's okay.
There they are. They see you. Oh, now we're on.
This meeting is being recorded.
80% of the Southwest? Okay. He says 80% of the Southwest. Latino. Okay. Do you know numbers on women?
It's probably between
for women between 3 and 5% in the Southwest.
Thank you.
Well, he's ethnic and I'm woman.
Any more follow-up, Pastor?
I'm sorry?
Did you have any follow-up?
Did we get the answer? Not
Yes.
really. I just heard 80% of something.
If you try to do it again, just 80%, he's asking 80%. You can just re-emphasize 80% of this.
Pastor, can you hear me? It was 80% Hispanics in the Southwest Regional Council, and about 3 to 5% women. For the numbers for the entire brotherhood, I don't have those numbers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to start with this presentation. The whole reason we're able to meet in a facility like this is because Doug McCarron and his team has a willingness to meet the needs of our contractors, okay? I'll just leave it at that. Our mission, to provide state-of-the-art training for our members, okay, and for our member partners. Who needs training? Everybody needs training, right? Okay, these are just some of the numbers, and I'm just going to flash them up there because I don't want to waste a lot of time, okay? But we spend over $200 million annually training throughout the United States and Canada. Okay, we have over 200 affiliated training centers. When people come out here, when our instructors come out here, when our members come out here, we pick up the tab for everything. About 5,000 full and part-time instructors throughout the country. When we work on curriculum, we bring the brightest instructors to the training center to teach them. When we're working on books, we bring 4 or 5 of the brightest instructors throughout North America together to work on a specific topic. We don't pull guys that are good at concrete or interior system. We pull interior system, the best of the best out here to work on it. 70 classrooms, we're on 29 acres. That's in this complex that we have right here. We do provide superintendent training. The superintendent training is it's 3-day workshops over 18 months. The company provides a mentor. They work with all of the company's paperwork and stuff like that. They do on-the-job training exercises that the mentor supervises. So everything is geared toward the company who sends the superintendent out there, not towards somebody else's forms and the way they do things. It's geared directly for how the company works. The only thing we ask our contractors to do is pay the guy's salary while they're here for those 3 days. We pick up all the rest of the tab for them. We also have a stepping up to UBC foreman class. That can be delivered at the local level. The books are finished. This class is really something that needs to be delivered at the local level to provide the number of foremen needed for our industry. We do have a certified rigger and signaler program. It is a third-party accredited by NCCA certification. We do some solar stuff. A lot of our work is in the framework of putting up the framework for the panels. Some cases we may install panels, most of the time we don't. The question that you asked, David, this is what we started to do for recruitment of young people. About 5 years ago, we developed a Career Connections high school curriculum. It's an out-of-the-box curriculum, all of the job sheets, all the lesson plans, all the grading groups, all the projects, everything is developed already for that instructor And we're in almost 500 schools right now. And that's pretty good growth for the last 5 years. And now we're starting to see some of those people who come through those programs get into our partnership, and it's been very beneficial because it gives them a good leg up on the program. So it starts out with the first book isn't even up there. The first book starts out with it's One Trade, Many Careers is the title of it. And we show them careers like electricians, sheet metal, plumbers, right? We say that the trades are open to everyone and there's opportunities for you to get into the trade, whatever you're inclined to do. Later on in the books, we start to focus mainly on carpentry because we're the ones who invested in building it. So, of course, we want to reap the benefits. But early on, it's about all the different trades, and that the trades are an option for these young people. So the first book is all about the young person. What are they going to bring to the job site? What is a contractor going to expect of them? Those kind of questions. And they have to look at themselves in that first book. The first book is all about that. If you look at the books, those covers tell you a lot. You see a lot of young people, you see a lot of snippets, and you see a lot of short things. If you open up that book, you would see that it looks more like a web page than a textbook, okay? And we find that the young people love that a lot better. But I know I'm an old guy anyway. We developed an ICRA class, and this has been a very good class for us. We developed it with Andy Streifel, who is an infection control specialist, and he's nationally known infection control specialist. Carpenters didn't know what we needed to train, so we went to the experts and asked them what we needed to do to cut down on hospital-acquired infections during construction. Our normal textbooks look like this. They don't have those fancy covers with all the different people on it. We build our own textbooks. We have over 156, 57 of them done. We're working on another 16. We're always working on textbooks. This one happens to be hazard communication. We provide them with a student manual, instructor guide, PowerPoints, worksheets, job sheets, everything that they need to duplicate this class. We bring them out here for the trainer. We send them home with everything they need to duplicate that class in our home area. So we work on a trainer principle. We have over 600 resources at our disposal. We've got 155 training manuals and 16 books in process. We also have this thing called Build a Book, where we can take any chapter from any manual and put it together with other chapters from different manuals or similar manuals. And we can develop a class specifically geared for a contractor in a local area. Let's say they need some scaffolding. Let's say they need some soffit work, some ceiling work. We can bring those chapters together and bring that training, have that training at the local training center to benefit that contractor who just did some big job. And we can tailor that training for that contractor. That's what our goal is. This is just a list of our classes. If you see something that jumps out at you that you want to question, just ask a question and I'll be able to answer. Hopefully I'll be able to answer this one. I'm going to go through this rather quickly. We do have a lot of health and safety courses. We do have a lot of skills courses as Bob told you. We handle skills, productivity, safety, end of our business. Install is our floor covering end. So anytime you see that install, that's our floor covering banner.
It's internet research. Teach about research on that.
I'm sorry.
Internet research you have up there?
Yeah, well, a lot of the courses that we do are for our instructors, and our instructors need to know how to research different products. there are new products on the market all the time, different chemical makeups. They need to be able to download things like the material safety data sheets, things like that. So we need to we teach them how to do that, how to research a subject, how to research different things. That's a good question, by the way. All of the classes after this, we've got that UBC Armstrong Ceiling certification class going on right now. That was a prelude, that 103 class, the bottom one there. That was a precursor to an actual Armstrong Ceiling certification for suspended ceilings and suspended soffits that we have going on right now. All of these classes are workforce education classes. The majority of our instructors come from the field. I came from the field. The majority of our instructors come right out of the field. They start training. They're good at their craft, but they don't know how to teach. So all of these classes are teaching you how to teach. These are all Penn State classes. They're distance learning classes through Penn State. We have member training. We have a number of member training classes where we bring our actual members out here for training. Industrial scaffold, gas turbine, steam turbine, mechatronics, underwater welding, underwater bridge inspection, Kirby Morgan, HAP technician. And then the building envelope classes. There are 5 building envelope classes. Building envelope principles, building envelope air and moisture, building envelope thermal, spray foam, and then a master certification. Those are all true NCCA master they're all certified classes. They're all third-party certification classes. We're actually working on our improving our online learning system, and the goals that we have to be able to notify our members by email through our training verification card, so that they can pick up some of the refreshers and updates that they need without having to go to the training center. Training the industry whenever there are new notifications come out, like when OSHA changes some of their regulations. Sometimes we can handle that right through our online learning center. And then quick tips for our instructors and for our members. The training verification card is this, if you're not familiar with it. The hospital people love it because they're able to shoot that QR code with their smartphone and see the training that our people have had. So our contractors love it. Our end users love it because if you go to work in a hospital and they want you to have the 24-hour ICRP training, if it doesn't show up on your card, they can refuse your entry into that hospital. So we're seeing that a lot. So we went over our mission, and that's to provide state-of-the-art training to our people. I talked to you about our training infrastructure, our skills, curriculum development. We're all about skills, safety, productivity, and attitude. We want our people to have the proper attitude. Okay? That should be our competitive, and that should conclude it. Thank you, Jim. So this is the tour. The tour has come to a conclusion, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Okay, so the headline is final board meeting has made the motion to adjourn for the record, Caleb. And the second was Pastor. It was Pastor here.
Oh, Pastor John is there.
Pastor is not, so he can't be.
This meeting is being recorded.
Here she is. All right.
Caleb, can we do roll call vote?
Yep. Kevin Albanese.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
Linda Clifford? Linda?
Absent. Absent.
Okay, David De La Torre?
Aye.
David Diaz?
Yes.
Susan Granzella?
Aye.
Joan Hancock?
Aye.
Pastor Herrera? Absent. Ed Lang?
Aye.
Mike Layton is absent. Marlo Richardson?
Aye.
Frank Shutter?
Aye.
Johnny Simpson is absent. And Nancy Springer?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Board stands adjourned. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity to serve you as chair this year, and have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you, Kevin.
Joan said thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, John. Hi, John. Let's get the feed yet.